Fasten your seatbelts. Just kidding. Hello, everyone. It's 1 o'clock, and we're going to begin the regular council meeting for Monday, March 13th, 2023. I'll call this meeting to order. Introduction of late items. Corporate officer, nothing tonight? Okay. Council, can I get an approval of the agenda, please? Councillor Van Elfen, Councillor Barkwell, all in favor? Great, thank you. And on to number 4, the consent agenda. Does anybody want to remove any items from the consent agenda? Go ahead, Councillor Peak.
I'd like to remove the letter from the Kettle Valley Gang, the Garnet Valley Gang, sorry.
Okay, so that's item B. Okay. And corporate officer, does that go down under?
It'll go to section 9.
Section 9, okay. Great, thank you. Okay, can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda with item B removed? Councillor Van Elfen, Councillor Barkwell, all in favor? Okay, carried, thank you. Okay, moving on to delegations. So our first delegation, 5.1, is Christy Johnson, and she's from Concerned Citizens for Water Use. So Christy, you have 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for accepting my application to speak to you as a delegation on behalf of Concerned Citizens for Water Usage. My name is Christy Johnson, and about 2 weeks ago, I stood before you to ask questions. I stated my concerns regarding the changes to secondary domestic services that affected 240 properties within the district. In the week following that council meeting, I spoke to numerous families affected by the change. Many shared the same concerns I had. Some had different concerns, and others educated me on the historical nature of this matter, which dates back over a decade. All of the people who I have spoken to, feel we have not been adequately consulted, provided the opportunity for meaningful engagement, or had the same equity and infrastructure that other property owners within the district have received through grants. We don't oppose paying for metered water. We strongly oppose paying for the infrastructure. Today, I'm here for the citizens who are affected by the request on February 15th for property owners to bear the cost of district-owned revenue-generating equipment. A request for $3,500 or lose your services altogether. We were previously told our legacy connections would remain. The district has previously received grant funds, and instead of providing grant equity to all property owners with secondary services, the same access to the grant funds that others provided, we were excluded. We have been excluded from experiencing the same benefit other property owners have received through no fault of our own. We were deliberately excluded by the district at the time of the initial install took place, and now we're being requested to pay for the meter other owners have received for free. Many of the property owners affected by this recent change are zoned within the ALR. We use these legacy irrigation connections to grow fruits, vegetables, and flowers, all things that are intended for ALL purposes. Our house will not be able to perform with the demand, and thus the irrigation lines will lack pressure and underperform with these changes. We were provided insufficient notice to make such a costly and large decision, and many of us wrote to you expressing our concerns and asking questions. I personally sent an email to each and every one of you on this council, and the only response I received was from Mayor Holmes, forwarding my concerns to the Works Department. I didn't receive a response from any of you. In my email, I posed a question to the council asking about the previous matter of this. In an email of March 2nd, a district staff member forwarded a Q&A to some of the questions, but not all. And in the email, it stated the district had received a high volume of questions and the district will not be responding to individual requests. Many of us folks continued to reach out to you, and they received radio silence from the district, from the councillors, and from our mayor. This is a stark contrast of the district's and council's commitment to transparency and honesty. And as a historical issue, in a council letter from February 2010, it states properties zoned A1, A2, and CR1 that are in the ALR, which have 1.98 arable acres or less, may retain their irrigation connection, and irrigation meter will be installed at no charge at the standpipe. That did never come to fruition. In a letter of October 29th, 2014 from Don Darling, the previous director of works, he states, Similar to domestic water review, the review of irrigators will include public consultation through open houses. We would encourage those residents who wish a say in how these rates will apply attend the public open house so that we can make sure their concerns or suggestions are considered. And in another letter of December 16th, 2014, Dawn states, the change in fees is reversed and a more in-depth public consultation process will take place, and Council unanimously supported this resolution. In point 4 of that same letter, public consultation will take place and residents will be provided with opportunities for input on agricultural rates and secondary domestic services. Point 5 states there will be no meters installed on second services until public consultation processes have been completed and council has made their decision. I believe it's important to note that at the time of the October 29th letter, Councillor Van Elfen was on the council, and at the time of December 16th letter, where council was unanimous in the decision, Councillor Holmes, Barkwell, Traynor, and Peake were unanimous in their support of further public consultation. This was one of the last things us property owners heard, and we continued to pay irrigation rates proportionate to the size of the property. We did not get free services. In the introductory letter sent out in 2019 from Mr. Mueller, the manager of utilities, he states, Council has supported a graduated approach, initially engaging the public and notifying the affected customers one group at a time. This approach will include a choice letter being sent out over the next course of 3 years. Customers will be provided with specific details on their choices and will be asked at that time to select an option, or the district will proceed accordingly, either metering or removing the services. There is no indication in that letter that we would be bearing the cost. We have not had any public house or community engagement surrounding this issue. As there's previously been stated, we feel that the district has not honored their promises dating back to 2010 to us affected property owners. Since 2019, us property owners have not heard anything about the proposed changes. From this time to present, there was a global pandemic that halted many functions of day-to-day living. Many people lost their jobs or had to adapt to working within their home. We've seen an astronomical increase of the cost of living, interest hikes on mortgages, increases on our utilities, and our wages and pensions have absolutely not kept up. The need for local homegrown food has been highlighted from the sparsity experienced during the pandemic. The 6-week demand of the district could not have come at a worse time. There is no opportunity for a payment plan. Essentially, if a person is not of a socioeconomic status to fork out $3,500, they're at a major disadvantage and lose their ability to retain their secondary service. For families such as mine, raising young children who are not in school, or seniors who are on a fixed income, it bears an unreasonable expense that many simply cannot afford, and they will lose their service. It begs the question, what is the point of being in the ALR if you cannot utilize your right to farm and have water for your farming, nor if you can pay the $3,500 to obtain the same? We feel it's very unfair given that the district was provided grant money for meters and they chose to exclude us from that. We're not asking for special treatment. We're asking to be included in a grant paid meter that every other connection was given. Some of you on this council have received that connection. We pay for a base rate each year proportionate to our property size, and the district willfully excluded us from reaping the same benefit other property owners did from that grant. The services only turned on for a certain period of time. It's not year round. All of the property owners I consulted with prior to submitting this application told me they use this service for watering fruit trees, nut trees, gardens, flowers, all purposes acceptable within the ALR zoning. If the concern is about water usage, why are condos on Lakeshore being allowed to have a pool on each deck? Had these properties been included on the metering?
Christy, I'm just going to interrupt you really quickly. How much time do you have left?
I have about 3 paragraphs.
Okay, go ahead.
Had these properties included, thank you. Had these properties been included on the metering when the district received the initial grant, this would not be a present day issue. Since the letter of February 15th, the district has been awarded $4,533,000 that's designated to infrastructure, and none of these funds have been allocated to meters. Why? We feel that since the district has not sought sufficient alternatives such as grants to pay for the meter, it sets a bad precedent for property owners to bear the cost of infrastructure that generates revenues for the district, and particularly bad when it's time to upgrade services that have existed for decades and they're still performing satisfactorily. To quote Councillor Patton in an article of January 2022, there's no cost benefit here to the homeowner. The benefit is to the district, and what we should be looking at is what's easier for our citizens and not what's easier for the district. And, quote, we work for the citizens and we should be looking at ways that make it simpler for our citizens, not to increase costs of our citizens. On behalf of the citizens concerned for water usage, we respectfully request the district and council to do the following. The request for $3,500 for metering equipment be halted until an open house takes place. Meaningful engagement and collaboration takes place with the affected property owners. 3, the district research and apply for applicable grants or use a portion of the grants received to pay for the meters, as was done for every other property. We implore you to consider the current economic climate affecting families across the country, including Summerland. For many of us 240 properties, we were never included in the initial grant when other SDD services received free meters, and we feel we should have been. We are now being requested to pay $3,500 without any consultation. We encourage you to seek out funding or dedicate funds to this because it's not fair to us property owners and we're being excluded. We didn't opt out of getting meters. We were never offered them in the first place. We are a group of properties that were intentionally excluded from receiving this benefit. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you, Christy. We appreciate you coming and sharing all of that information with us. You can stay up at the podium if you want to. Council, do you have any questions of Christy for clarification at all? Councillor Betts, and then we'll go to Councillor Peak.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Actually, this question is for Dave, our Director of Finance. Can you remind me if there is some way that we can provide time to pay for people who otherwise are going to be faced with a $3,500 bill when we do this work?
Through the mayor. There are alternatives. I think at the last meeting, council had asked staff to do some work in terms of looking at a parcel tax or a property tax, and that administratively is not feasible. However, in terms of providing additional time for residents, yes, we can. The thought a possible solution could be if the work is being performed kind of in the spring, we can extend to probably December 31st of each year the ability for those residents to pay those bills. One of the things to note there, though, is come that December 31st time period, of course, if the payments are not received, they would be transferred onto individual property tax rolls. But the ability is there.
Yep, follow up.
Thank you. Just to follow up, so that would be if it was in April of 2024 that the meter was installed, then it would be due by December 31st of that year, the bill due date. If it wasn't paid in full at that time, it would then go on to the property tax, which would be due July 31st.
Through the mayor, yes, July, it's the first Friday of July every year.
And so would up until the property tax was due, would that all be without interest?
So through the mayor, no, there would be interest charges, and they would be effective the date of the transfer onto the property tax roll. So that would be January 1st. So interest would accrue up until July.
Sorry, you're on.
Thank you.
Okay.
How is that fair to others who received it for free that we would then pay for the cost and then the interest as well?
Just a quick interjection here. Council can ask questions, but that's okay. But we did hear everything that you said and we took down notes. So, but that's okay. If council has a question for you, then you're welcome to speak, okay?
Okay, thank you. My apologies.
No worries. No, that's fine. Okay, Dave, were you going to answer Councillor Betts' question? Oh, you did? Okay. All right, we're going to go on to Councillor Peak then, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will ask the question of Ms. Johnson. Do you think it's fair, or can we ask the question, why do we as a council think it's fair that these people would be charged interest and will have to pay for their pumps in this particular instance? That's a question for you. Oh, Brad's going to get into it.
Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, thanks. And the question of fairness is not really One that staff's really prepared to answer at this point in time. This has been a decision made by council through previous deliberation. So, if council has any concerns on our approach, then we can happy to take direction on the change of our approach. But we got to keep in mind that these domestic second services have been in place for a number of years. So this has been a long-standing outstanding item that we need to address, and this has been the approach that council's requested that we move forward with.
Thank you, Brad. I have to say that I must apologize as a councillor. Back when I was on council, in the interim, I thought there had been consultation that had gone forward, because that was my expectation as a councillor when I sat here. I will ask Dave a question. We have received $4.5 million, but this council at this point has not had any opportunity to speak about any disposition on those funds. Would there be any preclusion to including the cost of pumps from this funding that we received from the province, Dave?
So through the mayor, that's a very good question. We are still waiting from the province to provide us with the terms and conditions associated with these funds. The letter is supposed to be coming out in the next week or two. The emphasis that the province has told us is that it is for infrastructure. Now, what that is exactly, we can't speak to yet. But once we have that information, we will be sitting down as staff and then also with council and coming up with some proposals as to how these funds could be allocated.
Thank you very much, David. Appreciate it. Thank you, Your Worship, for the possibility of that discussion, and I will bring that forward at the time.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Peak. Any further questions? Councillor Barkwell.
Perhaps our speaker can answer one question that weighs heavily on my mind. We have 2,130 property owners between a quarter acre and 2 acres. And it would cost over $7 million for everybody to get a free meter. This is obviously the reason why they weren't installed at the time. The funds ran out and they drew the line back in 4 councils ago that it would be 2 acres or more would get the meters. Just the money was for irrigation. Yeah. So how do we deal with the other 2,000 people if you get a free meter? What would be fair? Why shouldn't they get an extra irrigation connection and meter?
If I may, our services are existing. They're not new services. I don't believe it's fair that you guys gave out, sorry, not you guys. I don't feel it's fair that the district allocated funds to a certain percentage of the properties and not us. I feel that if there was going to be a cost that we would need to be taken on, the grant should have been divided by all properties affected. I don't feel that being excluded from the opportunity to have access to that meter was made in good faith, or it was not equitable to us either.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Barkwell.
So your view is that, if I understand it correctly, everybody who had a meter, regardless of the lot size, or I mean, everybody who had a connection, regardless of a second connection, you already got a free meter for your house. Everybody who had a second connection, the funds should have been prorated among all those people. But I mean, that was 4 councils ago, so we can't do anything about that. My question is, how is it fair? Because you happen to have a second connection and 2,000 other people do not have the good fortune of a second connection, that you should get a meter that the balance of the water consumers would be paying for. That's what I face.
Use your microphone. Thanks.
I appreciate that question, and I think it's a great question to be brought forward at a public open house meeting where we all have the opportunity to weigh in on it.
Just for clarification to our acting CAO, the current charge that the district has requested homeowners pay for their second service is $3,500. Can you just, do you have a brief outline of what the total cost is to install a domestic second service on a household?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Deputy Mayor. I just got an estimate from our manager of utilities this morning that was updated of February 22, 2023, that are on average, our estimate for the installation of a new meter is $5,000. So the $3,500 has been a policy decision of council, I think dating back till 2020 when council did first discuss this as a potential cost recovery mechanism, but it's not the full cost.
Okay, do we have an actual cost of the meter itself?
Material cost, it says here, is $2,274, and then there's other equipment and labor costs.
Okay. All right, thank you for that clarification. Okay, council, do we have any other questions for Ms. Johnson or any other comments before we move on? Okay, I'll go to Councillor Betts.
Thank you. I do have an additional comment in terms of water billing for some of the unique properties who are actually farming. I've reached out to BC Assessment regarding policy of lot sizes and farm income, and we've heard a lot from concerned residents who are contributing to our local agricultural community. Their concern is that the transition to domestic rates and volume limits will be too expensive to maintain their farms and not enough water. Now, this is separate from the meter issue. This is about the price of water. Council, is this something you would be interested in pursuing? In other words, I would like to make a motion. Can we review the policy regarding bulk water rates for small income farmers on properties less than 2 acres?
Okay, corporate officer, is that motion worded correctly? Okay. She's going to put it up on the screen for us. Okay, do we have a seconder for that? Go ahead, Councillor Van Elfen.
I'll second it just to get it on the floor so I can argue it or discuss it. But my question is through Councillor Betts. You said you had conversation with BC Assessment. What's the threshold on a small holding under 5 acres?
So right now, as it says on the BC Assessment website, it is farm status for accessing the water or for farm class regulation to meet the minimum gross income requirements is $2,500 if the total area of the farm operation is between 1.98 acres and 10 acres. But it's $10,000 if the total area of the farm operation is less than 1.98 acres. So I reached out to BC Assessment for clarification on that issue. I don't have that answer yet, but that's what I'm digging into to better understand. But I do think that there's a discussion to be had on reviewing the policy for some of Summerland's small producers, paying for a water meter, as all residents have had in Summerland. And there are reasons that council made the decision to move towards a meter. But this is talking about, do we want to review our pricing for properties under 2.0 acres?
Okay, any other comments or questions for clarification? Go, Councillor Barkwood.
Thank you. Actually, I'm kind of glad that Councillor Betts has brought this up because I would go beyond that and want to review all of our water rates. The water rates that we have now, for some that weren't here before, were established by Dr. Bartomchuk on what a normal quarter-acre lot would require to water the yard. And it's a fairly, really complicated formula. But if your yard is larger than a quarter of an acre, the costs become kind of punitive. And so it was adopted considering that, all you're really going to get is enough water for a typical quarter-acre yard. But maybe we should think beyond that. The principles are, of course, we have to recover all of our costs. We have to have a rate that's fair for everybody. And we want to encourage conservation. Keeping those principles, I think that there might be some opportunity for reviewing the rates and making it perhaps not so punitive for people who have larger yards. So yeah, I would support a review of the rates in general, not just say properties with of 2 acres or something. So.
Okay, I think Councillor Van Elfen had his hand up, and then Councillor Betts.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I don't disagree with Councillor Betts at all. My concern is that it's not, I'm hearing you, but I'm just trying to twist my head around it because as a farmer, I have agricultural water because I'm actually farming. And if I show X amount of dollars gross sales, I even get a break on my taxation on my land, not my house. How do I wrap my head around all these properties that aren't necessarily farming? Why should they get farm water rates where maybe you are farming? Why, so some of them have a glorious lawn and some are actually growing food and, and fruit trees and what have you. So that's where my dilemma is. I'm not going to sit here and say I disagree with you. That's not the case. Am I open to a review? Sure. Too bad our director of utilities isn't here today. It's unfortunate, but I don't know. I don't know where to go. To be honest with you, I appreciate the motion that's been brought forward. I think we need more dialogue because it's a can of worms. And I mean, I can agree with Councillor Barkwell too. If we give it to you, what about the other people? And then there's the historic side of it. And that's not in all cases, but in a lot of historic parts of this is that Lot A ended up with the second service after they subdivided Lot B, C, D, and E. And this guy was fortunate enough to have the second service, but that second service was there for a lot larger of a property at one time. But that's not in all cases. And then you make the argument about zoned in the ALR. And you make a good point. Because if that was my property, and then I'd be going, well, let me subdivide. So I don't know. I appreciate all the comments. I appreciate Councillor Betts's motion she's brought forward, but I think it's going to need some more dialogue. Sorry.
Okay, I think Councillor Betts, and then Councillor Peak, and then Barkwell.
Thank you. So I think the question of reviewing, if we can, the motion as it stands is, can we review the bulk water rates? So the important differentiation here that I'm coming to understand is that the second, if all of our residents who are required to get a second meter at this time, or to shut off and sort out irrigation on your own dime, which is costly, it would have to be proof of farm income. It would have to be tested, right? There would have to be a threshold. Staff could potentially look at that. That's not an answer I have right now today, but it is 2,500 on 1.9 acres and above, and it's 10,000 on 2 acres and below. I really think that the heart of Summerland is supporting some of our small agricultural producers. They sell food at our farmers markets and to local residents that contributes to our healthy community. And so I want to just clarify that these residents who would get a second meter would not qualify for agricultural water because their properties are under 2 acres. But they could potentially continue with the bulk water rates as they have today if they have proven farm income at a set threshold, which we do not have determined. If we did that, then that could potentially be proven annually. And if it wasn't working, then that service would then have regular domestic water rates. You have to prove that you're farming and making an income of a certain amount. That's the motion on the table.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Councillor Peak.
I appreciate the discussion and the motion. However, I don't think that I would be prepared to vote on bulk rates at this point. I would vote on bringing a report for discussion regarding rates and the water and allocations in general. I also agree with the audience members that have come here to speak to us today that there should be an open house to talk about their problems and their reflection on their needs, because as Councillor Van Alphen says, there are a lot of different scales within the review that would take place in that discussion. So I think this council needs to have that discussion and needs to have that consultation with the public before they make a decision.
Okay, we do have a motion on the table related to Councillor Betts.
I understand that.
Okay.
I'm just indicating how I feel about
Sure.
the fact we're coming to a motion. I think it's premature, but I would agree to having a report and a discussion.
Okay. If you would like to do an open house or anything like that, you could bring forward a motion after this one. Okay.
So this motion is really just about reviewing rates, not about the installation of the meters, right?
Correct.
Yeah. I had a comment on the meters, because it's been raised a number of times that there was no grant funding. Well, we did get grant funding. We got grant funding to install meters on agricultural property. We got enough to do 2 acres or more. The reason for that funding was so that the water treatment plant, which was new at the time, couldn't handle the amount of water that was required. So meters are one way of reducing water consumption along with twinning the lines, which is sort of an ongoing process. So there's always grant money for water safety. There's a lot of communities in Canada that don't even have potable water. The grants that we've received have been on the justified, you might say, because it increased our water safety. Garnet Valley, it's one example. The water didn't have the level of treatment that is required today, and that comes from the Choke Creek plant, the plant in Prairie Valley. So now that treated water goes up all the way to Garnet Valley. So grants for infrastructure for water are all about water safety. There's no chance that you're going to get a grant so that you can have extra water to water your lawn. And there might be some people growing some fruit trees, but we got 240 properties, and there's just, it's all about safety when it comes to grants, water safety. And there's a lot of communities that aren't having water that is adequately treated yet. So I think they would be a higher priority.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Barkwell. Okay, we have a motion on the table. Councillor Patton, and then after we're going to vote on this motion, okay?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think this would be a question for staff, and maybe Joe would be the right person to talk about this. So Joe, if we're talking secondary lines, and we're talking in regards to Councillor Barkwell was talking about water safety, those irrigation lines, are they protected not at the property currently with either a double check valve or a dual check valve, or is that the responsibility of the owner after it hits private property? I'm on a segue here, that if we look at grant funding, or if we could we not utilize water safety in regards to these second services not being protected? Thanks.
Thanks. Through the mayor, I'll try to answer this as best I can here. So the pit meters, or the meters that would be going in, do have a check valve on them. So it does a backflow prevention somewhat. I don't know if that's a certified one.
No, it's not certified.
I don't think it's certified, but it does assist in some sort of protection. So that would be part of the install with the pit meters that would go in.
Thank you so much. So it's a dual check valve and it's a non-testable device. Am I correct?
Non-testable, yes.
Thank you so much.
Okay, council. So do we have any other comments on the motion that's on the table? No? Okay, seeing none. So I'm going to call the question then. Does everybody understand it? Yeah. Okay. So go ahead.
So this report will come to us from staff once they've determined in regards to the rates. Thank you.
Acting CEO Brad, can you clarify when this report would likely come back to council?
Well, I'd have to check with our director of utilities, and he's not here, unfortunately. But like we would probably bring it forward at a future council meeting, unless we hear otherwise from council that they wanted to see it sooner than that. We have 2 meetings in April, but I don't know how long it'll take to review our current rates, especially if we, like what Councillor Barkwell has indicated, want to look at a larger review of our rates versus just specific parcels of 2 acres. Then that could take more time at the staff level. But
Okay, well, right now the motion is specific to less than 2 acres. So that's what we're asking for, unless anybody makes an amendment. So it wouldn't be as much work, hopefully. Okay, so I'm going to call the question then. All in favor of this? Okay, opposed? Okay, 1 opposed. Councillor Peak? All right, that carried. Is there any further discussion related to the what Christy came to present today? Any further motions? Go ahead, Councillor Peak.
I would like to put forward a motion that we actually have staff do a public consultation with those that are affected by the letters that were sent out.
Okay, can I get a seconder? Councillor Van Elfen?
Are you looking at a open house type situation? I agree.
Okay, so you're seconding? Corporate Officer, could we get that motion on the screen just so everyone can read it? Okay, council, discussion. Go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a question through staff. When do we turn our water on? Irrigation? April 11th? So then are we then going to recommend we turn these on until we get these numbers and open houses and whatever behind us?
Councillor Peak, what's your thought on that? We did put a deadline in the letter that went out to residents for March 31st.
In consideration of the fact we have never done the consultation which was proposed in the past, then I think that the water should flow and we should have the consultation.
Okay, Brad.
I think there was, thank you for the comment, the opportunity to comment. I think there was a comment earlier that the review of bulk water rates is really separate from the metering question, which is kind of the one that we put to residents by March 31st. So if there is a direction here to consult with property owners, perhaps we could have that meeting before March 31st with this open house idea. But the review of water rates is a different type of question. It's although related to the metering question, it's not directly related, if that makes sense. So it could happen thereafter, if that helps.
Okay, Councillor Betts and then Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In light of the information that council did see that led us to make this decision, that residents feel that they haven't had access to, I feel that supporting the notion of an open house is transparent and demonstrates why the decision came to what it is, and that we weren't trying to make it behind closed doors and truly with the best of intentions, crunching the numbers in the first place. But I think for transparency, an open house is a responsible thing to do for our residents at this time, but also minding the time constraints of the March 31st deadline. Staff, is it possible to have such an event in that timeline, or do we have to push?
Yeah, if I may answer that. Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have the right staff to answer that question, probably the Director of Utilities as well as the CAO, but you know, we can try to have something done before March 31st if council does move forward with this direction. We could probably have some conversations fairly soon after this meeting to try to set something up quickly.
You can follow up.
Sorry, because I know Councillor Van Elfen is next, but this is related. At that, if we were to have an open house before March 31st, could we agree as a community to decide on our choices once you feel that you have a fulsome amount of information?
Okay. We don't have a back and forth here, just so we know, okay? We got to keep this meeting on track. All right, I'm going to go to Councillor Van Elfen, remembering speaking to the motion that is on the table about a possible public meeting, okay? Go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. That staff be directed to consult with property owners in an open house, not just consult with individual property owners. It needs to be a public hearing, a public meeting. Just the way it's written, it's, you know, like we've already said that individuals could talk to staff one-on-one. I'd rather it was a community-wide discussion.
Councillor Peak, that was your intention, correct? A public meeting?
It was my intention, and I'd like an opportunity to speak when we're finished at whatever point.
Yeah. Councillor Van Elfen, you're done? Okay, I'll go over to Councillor Peak and then to Councillor
Yes. To be honest, I don't care if it gets done by March 31st, because I would feel that the water should be turned on for these people, even if the decision, if the meeting is not possible before April the 11th. I think we should have that consultation. It's not just transparency, it's accountability. And I think that that's really important for our community and the people that are affected, and reflection on the other people in our community that expect to be consulted on any future directions that we take.
Okay, Councillor Patton. Councillor Barkwell.
Yeah, I was going to speak the same way as Councillor Van Elfen. We have to be clear. Consult is a pretty open and vague word. What I'm sure you really meant was that we have an open house, which is what these people are asking for. I don't see why we need to stick to this deadline. It's been 15 years so far. Several more months isn't going to make any difference in order to get this consultation process done. I will say out of it is that we have talked about this for 15 years. And one of the comments, which I think is really true, which we'll probably hear a lot about in the public consultation, is there's 240 unique situations. And that's part of the problem. But that's only part of the problem. The bigger part of the problem is, what do we do with the 2,000 other people that feel that they should have a second connection too?
Okay, any further comments at all? Acting CEO, should we set a time for that now, or let staff determine a time for that public meeting? Okay, do you have enough direction?
Yep.
Yep, okay. All right, council, we will vote on this then, unless there's no further comments. Okay, all in favor? Okay, opposed? All right, carried. So we will be having a public open house, okay?
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Yeah, and thank you very much for coming today. Thanks.
I think there's some other people that wanted to talk as well. Is there an opportunity after I speak or at the
There'll
end?
be an opportunity at the end of our meeting today. You were part of a delegation, so it's kind of a bit of a special circumstance. But public comment will come at the end of our meeting related to this topic. Okay, yeah, thanks a lot. Okay, So we are moving on now to our second delegation, which is Sally Pierce and Craig Pringle from the Summerland Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you very much for having me. And oh, Cameron, do you want to come up? So joining me today is Cameron Walker, as Craig has been delayed and won't make the meeting today. Cameron is behind me, and then our chamber president, Luke, is to my right.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, Sally, just remember to turn your mic on there for me, so it'll go red when it's on, okay?
My name's Sally Pierce, and I'm the Executive Director of the Summerland Chamber of Commerce and Tourism Summerland, known as Visit Summerland. This initiative has been put together by our Tourism Advisory Council, and the initiative is for responsible liquor consumption in designated public places. We are proposing a pilot project for 2023. So some background to this, Penticton has been doing this initiative successfully now for 3 years. The Tourism Advisory Council, prior to me taking on this role, did a lot of work in consulting with Penticton. Cameron, I know you were a big part of that. So in May 2020, just briefly, there's a full report and supporting documentation, but the PowerPoint here is more of a summary so that we can, summarize the extensive work that's been done and the research. So in May of 2020, a 1-month pilot program allowing consumption of liquor in select parks and beaches along Okanagan Lake was approved by council. In June of 2020, Penticton City Council passed a bylaw extending the pilot through the rest of the summer. And in July, they then extended it to Scarha Lake as well as Okanagan Lake. They wrapped the pilot program up in October of 2020. And in 2022, Penticton City Council voted unanimously to extend the policy for a 3rd straight year. The supporting consultation and the documents that are part of this application today was the City of Penticton, Blake Levin, who's Director of Development Services, the Summerland RCMP, Sergeant Dave Preston, the Summerland Tourism Advisory Council, and Bottleneck Drive Association. So what we're proposing is to allow the responsible consumption of liquor for a 2023 pilot project, proposing 12 weeks or advised by local services. And we're proposing it for this summer of 2023. 3 months being June, July, and August. We're proposing it between the hours of 12 and 8. And we're proposing 3 Summerland beaches, which is Rotary Beach, Peach Orchard Park, and Powell Beach. We're suggesting that we review milestones every 4 weeks to make sure that the project is on track, and an opportunity then to address any concerns or challenges that may be raised, with the ability to postpone the remainder of the project if required. Some of the highlights that we've seen reported by Penticton, they've talked about national media attention. They've said that this initiative has supported the restaurant and brewery industry in a unique way during challenges of the pandemic. The results of the summer showed few instances of abuse and good decision-making from those who participated. And that's again from Blake Levin, Director of City of Penticton. The Parks Department reported that there were no instances of conflicts between intoxicated persons and park staff. And the Penticton RCMP concluded that overall, it didn't appear that allowing liquor consumption within the specified areas added any significant strain to police resources. Now, there is more information in the report that I submitted, where the RCMP had set up a specific code for files associated with liquor consumption on the beach. And over the course of the summer, the code was used on 80 files, none of which resulted in criminal charges. And there's more detail in the pilot project documents submitted with the delegation application. I haven't gone into much more detail on that simply because it's quite technical. So appendices to this application was the responsible liquor consumption in designated public places, the pilot project by the City of Penticton. That was in November of 2020. A secondary document reported on in April of 21, and again in November of 21, and there's a letter of support from Bottleneck Drive Association. And that's it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for your presentation. Council, we will be discussing this just coming up in the agenda, but do you have any specific questions for Sally while she's here? Seeing none? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your time today.
Okay, moving on to our public comment opportunity. We have 15 minutes for public comment. At this point in time, we're just asking if somebody wants to discuss any items on the agenda. If you wanted to talk about the domestic second service, that would come up at the end of the meeting. So this public comment is just related to items on the agenda right now. And corporate officer, do we have anybody wanting to speak at this one? No? Not right. Okay. All right. Dawn?
Yeah, well, is this on? Okay. I just wanted to ask a question about the point of speaking to something on the agenda. Since Christie's presentation was on the agenda, can I not speak to it at this point?
She was part of the delegation, so no, it's only things that are coming up below on our agenda, so business items.
Okay.
Yeah.
It is on the agenda, though.
I know, that is confusing.
It used to be you'd highlight them and say these.
Yes, you are correct. You are correct. That's a very good point. We will clarify that.
She did a very good job, by the way.
But we'll hear from you at the end of the meeting. It shouldn't take too long. Okay, thank you for waiting. Okay, seeing no one wanting to speak then, we're going to move on to our business items. So 7.1 then is responsible liquor consumption in public places. And our Director of Community Services will present this. Lori.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Good afternoon, Council. As a follow-up to the Chamber of Commerce delegation presentation to implement the proposed responsible liquor consumption in designated public places pilot project for 2023, Council approval is required for an exception to the Parks Regulation Bylaw number 2022-012 in order for this program to proceed. The bylaw states that no person shall be permitted in any park to possess open liquor at any time except where the said liquor is possessed pursuant to and in compliance with a license issued under the Liquor Control and Licensing Act. As noted in the presentation, the Chamber is proposing that Summerland Council consider permitting responsible liquor consumption at the District of Summerland's 3 main beaches, Peach Orchard, Rotary, and Powell, for the months of June, July, and August between the hours of 12 noon and 8 p.m. The program would be evaluated monthly and could be ceased at any time should issues arise. No major concerns have been raised by the RCMP or bylaw with initiating a trial of this program. They would continue to monitor the beaches to ensure responsible behavior and follow up on any complaints that were issued. No financial implications are expected with this program at this time. As a responsible consumption of liquor is being considered and implemented in other neighboring communities, it is recommended that Council consider supporting a pilot project in Summerland for the upcoming summer months. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Council, questions? Go ahead, Councillor Peak, and then Councillor Patton.
I'm actually very excited by this opportunity. I think it's time for our community and time in the world. My question to Lori is that if we implement a pilot project, we're not changing the bylaw at this time. So we're just implementing a pilot project, and then if it proves that we that it works well, then we would look at changing the bylaw in the future. Would that be correct?
Through the Deputy Mayor, to Councillor Peak, that is correct. At this point, we wouldn't be changing the bylaw, but should we look to make something permanent in the future after the trial period has been completed, then we would consider it a bylaw change at that time.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I believe this is already happening in our beaches. It's just well hidden. But my one question is, in your report, Lori, it talks about that the RCMP and bylaw have had no issues. Yet the report that was brought forward by the Chamber of Commerce and the documentation only spoke of the RCMP and only spoke of the Penticton Parks Department. So what I'm kind of wondering is, bylaw wasn't, we didn't hear from bylaw in regards to these reports, because those are truly the staff members that would be walking the beaches and initially, and RCMP would come in on a, when required. And so I was just wondering on the report why we would talk about bylaw when bylaw hasn't been referred to. I'm in favor of this. I think that as a pilot project, I think this will work well for us. It's just that I think that in the report where we reference bylaw, where bylaw hasn't been referenced. So that would just be my only, it's more of a comment. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Van Elfen and then Betts.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I too think it's long overdue, to be honest with you. And my question is through to Lori, if I may. Why would you not consider including Memorial Park? Reason being is that's where we have our music in the summer on Wednesday evenings. Or do we relocate the music down to a beach that has the ability to have alcohol? Like, I don't know. I mean, I realize it's a pilot, but it's kind of too bad we didn't look at that, because, we have that venue on Wednesday nights. I don't know if we're going to have it again this year. I'm hoping we will. But anyway, just a quick question. Thank you.
Thank you for the question through the Deputy Mayor. At this point, we were looking, or the Chamber was proposing one beach as a pilot, and it got extended to the 2 other destination beaches. We didn't have a fulsome discussion about Memorial Park outside that there could be some issues with potentially with bylaw and other consumption outside of events. And so we decided just to start with 3 beaches and see how that goes. Should council want to extend the scope of this, they could make an amendment or make an adjustment to the resolution, but I don't know if we would want to discuss that with bylaw first.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Actually, I have 2 questions. One, I know that Penticton noted in their report that there was an increase in waste and recycling requirements at each of the beaches. Are we going to be putting out additional recycling, especially recycling cans, bottles? Do we have those facilities ready to go?
Through the Deputy Mayor, we will be monitoring that. We do have recycling at all the beaches, so we would continue to look at picking those up. If there were issues with them being overburdened with bottles, we would assign additional resources for pickup. Also, the Tourism Advisory Committee had identified if that became an issue, they might have a volunteer program that they could work with some volunteer groups to assist with recycling pickup if required.
And my second question is actually, I know the program is from 12 until 8, but would it be possible to change that or have the discussion about making it from noon until dusk? As I feel like that's when people are naturally using the lakefront parks. I mean, it doesn't really matter what time it is, they're there till dusk.
Thank you for the question, and I think council can adjust any portion of the council resolution as they see fit.
Okay, I just have a couple of quick questions. I'm okay with keeping it at 8 because I think for our trial period, it's good to have concrete, like something concrete, just so that bylaw has that going forward and the RCMP have that going forward. And then depending on the feedback that we get, we could always adjust times. Yeah. In terms of education of the public, are there going to be signs at the beaches? Or how is that going to be communicated?
Through the chair, we hadn't allocated any resources or funding or thoughts around. We really weren't going to put any signage at this time. We were just going to trial it without an education or awareness campaign.
So would bylaw be actively, I guess, educating the public on certain nights to do with this, or is it just complaint driven? How would that work? Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, thank you. If I can take that question on behalf of the bylaw services department. I think we can definitely do some proactive education on this while our enforcement staff are out and about. Our plan for the summer months is to stagger our shifts. We've got 2 full-time bylaw enforcement officers. So with doing that, we'd be able to get weekend coverage as well as perhaps some evening coverage, maybe targeting certain evenings to inform residents of the rules. Kind of looking at the city of Penticton's report, there were cases of people going past that time period, so that might be a concern. But again, this is all part of the pilot project findings, if that makes sense.
So if the public has any complaints, do they call the RCMP or do they call bylaw?
To answer that, I think it's either depends on the case, what the situation is. Noise is definitely bylaw. If there's significant concerns going on, perhaps RCMP. If our bylaw staff's not available, then RCMP is the default.
Okay, if we do any public information about this trial, I think that we just need to communicate that, what the public does if they do have feedback, or if there's if for some reason there are any issues. Councillor Peak.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I think it's silly not to have some kind of education process. So you should be writing a piece that goes in the paper. I mean, it's a little bit of a celebration to have the opportunity to do picnicking and have a drink in these public areas. And the fact is that it will make an attraction to certain things that are going on. Music in the Park was located at Pete George at one time. They had a review, and the people that went said the parking was difficult down there. They were better off on the Memorial Park. But, you know, the opportunity to have socializing with a beer in those parks is something that I think we should be educating people about, and having a little bit of a media presence on. So if you may not call it education in the same way, but why would you not have a sign on each park that say, social, you know, drinking is allowed between 12 noon till 8 p.m. enforced by bylaw. And people are aware of it. They know there's a time frame. It just makes good sense to me.
Okay, Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Like Councillor Betts, I too wondered a little bit about this 8 p.m. deadline. It's not like on a June 21st, longest day of the year, 8 o'clock comes along and it's like, oh, put it away now. It's not really a practical. And so I looked at Penticton, and Penticton chose 8. And it has worked for them. But if whoever wants to put the motion forward chose 9, I'd vote for that too. Or, yeah.
Okay, would you like to put a motion forward?
Should I read the motion?
Just one sec, actually. Councillor Betts, do you have a comment before?
I think just related exactly to that is that Penticton possibly had an enforcement issue because it ended at 8 o'clock and people are still just naturally out because it's light out. You know, it's not a defining moment. I think that's when bylaw families, I think that you can quite easily tell when people leave the beach and it's at dusk, and that's when maybe responsible consumption at the beach should end. So I would like to propose an amendment that between the hours of 12 noon and dusk during the months of June, July, and August 2023.
Okay, Councillor Barkwell?
You actually, I don't know if that's not really a formal amendment because the motion hasn't been made yet to make that amendment, but I wouldn't support dusk because that's too undefined. You got to put a time in to aid enforcement. You know, somebody come along and say, oh, it's not dark yet, you know, whatever. So you got to pick a time.
Okay, corporate officer, we have a motion on the table that says dusk right now. No? Oh, sorry, it's not on the table, it's been
tracking
proposed.
what council was kind
Okay,
of going.
all right.
with, So
Councillor Betts, do you want to adjust that before you put it on the table formally? No? Okay, all right. This stands then. Okay, okay.
So I'll put a friendly amendment to the original motion. So the motion that we actually vote on will include from 12 noon to 9 p.m.
through the mayor to council. So we actually just need a motion. We need a council member to bring forward a motion on the floor.
Fine, we'll bring it forward. If I'm still on the floor for speaking, it's going to be noon to 9 p.m.
Okay. I do apologize for the confusion. I don't do this regularly, so that is my fault. Okay, so Councillor Peak, do we have a seconder? Councillor Van Elfen. All right, any discussion? We've kind of talked about it already. Any further discussion or questions? No? No. All right, okay, I will call the question then. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, carried unanimously. Thank you for that. Thank you, Lori. Okay, moving on to 7.2, sidewalk patio applications. Over to Brad for this one.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. The development of downtown sidewalk patio guidelines has been a strategic priority project of council since the past council term starting in 2018. As such, the development of a new sidewalk patio guidelines has been included as well in our new downtown neighborhood action plan as an implementation project. Sean Goodsill, our manager of works, and his team has now been able to develop a new policy for council's consideration to improve the safety, appearance, and design of sidewalk patios in our downtown core, and to help promote downtown vibrancy and business diversification options for small local businesses. I'd like to thank Sean and Annika for bringing this forward and providing to council for consideration prior to the start of patio season this year. And with that, I'll pass the floor to Sean.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Deputy Mayor and Council. Currently, the District of Summerland uses a constructive temporary road, sidewalk, or parking stall closure application form that does not require adequate information or provide the applicant with any direction or requirements in many areas, and it did not take an application fee. Staff members got together to try to see what would work. We wanted to keep the patios consistent, safe, and trying to keep the process uncomplicated. This may not be a perfect policy, but it gives us a starting point because the weather will be changing soon, and we need to get moving on this because we know that there are going to be some applications moving forward. I did, in the report, I did highlight some sections. I'll just go over some key considerations in the policy, and then after that, if we had any questions or discussions. The procedure section, we're asking the applicant to have a site plan liability insurance up to $2 million. That was consistent with other communities we looked at. Some communities were up to $5 million. We thought that was too much. That's more of a burden on the owner. Obligations, performance, and enforcement. This section gives the district the flexibility to revoke a permit, remove a patio, or allow access to the patio area if required. It is standard language that other communities have and ensures the applicant knows the parameters of the temporary license. Location, this section gives direction of standard clearance issues from various areas and where the sidewalk patios can be considered within the District of Summerland. And we have a map on the policy. Limits of the amount of parking spaces used so there are enough parking stalls in the area for other businesses. We don't want businesses to take up too many parking spaces. This section also indicates that the district Works and Infrastructure Department will place no post barriers, helping to control the applicant's setup location. So that was something that we thought that may work a little bit better, and we can discuss the barriers at the end. Hours of use, validity period. This defines the hours of operation, so noise will not be an issue for anyone living within the proximity of the patio area. April 1st to October 31st was considered. Gives the district crews time to clean up the downtown and start prepping for winter decorations and other things. Overhead projections. This ensures there are no obstacles in the way for pedestrians. Railing, safety, barrier height. If businesses choose to keep the patio area on the sidewalk next to their building, this gives them some guidelines on what they need to consider. Railings, sidewalk clearance, etc. It also outlines the furniture equipment that may be kept on the patio and ensures the space is visually appealing too. The district will not consider any permanent structures at this time. Sidewalk treadway requirement. This section considers the pedestrian, especially those with disabilities, so that transitions are done in accordance with appropriate standards and there is enough room for people walking in both directions when passing. Drainage and road maintenance consideration. This section ensures that staff have access to maintain existing infrastructure within the patio area, including line painting if necessary, street sweeping, full access to catch basins or bell boxes, or anything else that comes up. And maintenance. This is a guideline that the applicants are responsible to keep their area clean daily, and all maintenance within the patio area is their responsibility during this period. I've noted there are some financial implications if we go to the low barrier that we had proposed in the reports. And I know there may be some questions about the low barrier. I just wanted to point out, I know that concrete isn't the best looking barrier, but if you are sitting next to a traveled road lane, that it's probably more safer, right? Or it's more safe. And these barriers, I just wanted to let council know that they may be different than some of the ones that you've seen last year, and they're actually only an 18-inch barrier. So they're only this tall. So they're not as high as like some of the other ones which are over 30 inches. And so having a low concrete barrier means that, you can still put aesthetic, barrels. In the case of Giant's Head, they may even be able to put the planters over the barrier, to hide it a little bit. So when staff discussed this, we thought that was a good, reasonable height that still makes the people safe in that area. And these are 30-kilometer travel lanes, so that helps quite a bit. I mean, if it were faster speeds, we probably would require a higher barrier. Any questions?
Council, any questions? Councillor Betts.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you for building and starting to get going on this policy. I do think that there's still room for some improvements. As a business owner in the food industry, I still think that that while the concrete barriers are a compromise over what was seen last year, I think that we can still do better. So what I've done is I actually found 3 examples myself. This is in Peachland. This is the Edgewater Grill on their main street, also 30 kilometers an hour, where that is the sidewalk in the front. The patio is right next to the building. And so that's how they have maintained. I think it's just for motorcycle parking out front, just space-wise, because it's more limited. I have another example which is actually in Edmonton, Alberta. Now, this restaurant is on White Avenue, a busy, busy thoroughfare. There's buses, it's 50 kilometers an hour. It's packed at all times. And they also have their patio just put up with fences. I think that it would still save our residents and our business owners this $300 fee that we're talking about, putting concrete barricades in front of our businesses at a cost of $300 and then try and beautify them. I think that's really limiting. So for me, I think that there's room to improve upon the fencing. I think that it's really important to think about basically the beautification of our downtown in supporting this proposal as it stands. So from a business perspective and from council's perspective, we're looking at the Downtown Neighborhood Action Plan, looking at beautifying our downtown. And I think that putting concrete barricades right through the middle of our downtown is working against what we're trying to go for here in Summerland, especially when on Sundays we have the farmers market, there's people walking around, and there's giant concrete barricades. And I do appreciate you bringing the ruler or your measuring tape to demonstrate the 18 inches. I really appreciate that. I still think the concrete barricades, I think that we can do better. I think Summerland is a beautiful place and that would take away from our downtown feel. So these comments, I have one additional comment, but I don't know if I'm taking everybody's time here. I also noted in the requirements that the district is requiring that that we retain the right to limit the number of patios. Do we have a definition on what that limit would be? Because I would think that we would let any business that met the qualification to have a patio could have a patio.
You want to answer that, if you can?
Through the chair. I can answer that last question. I believe we had that discussion, and if too many businesses in a row wanted patios, it may take away a lot of the parking, but I think we just have to look at it on a case-by-case scenario. And then going back to the railings and the $300 fee, well, the $300 fee is only covering a portion of it. And I agree, like concrete's not the best, but it is safer than railings. And the examples that were shown are pedestrians walking next to the roadway. And pedestrians are always used to walking against the roadway. When you're seated next to a roadway, that's a different story, and railings may not be the choice, or maybe it's a combination. I think I answered some.
Okay, Councillor Peak, and then Van Elfen, and then Barkwell.
I appreciate the discussion on safety. I make note of the fact that some of the photographs that Councillor Betts put forward both those areas have bump outs. So the area for a patio were much larger than what we presently have in Summerland. I make note of the fact that one of the patios we had a couple of years ago actually had a platform the patio was on, and then a railing against the platform. So I'm wondering if, although we might give the barrier of an 18-inch, much like a Jersey barrier, but a little higher, that we could have a point that says other possibilities would be considered, and then it could be considered by staff. So that might be an amendment to the policy, because what we have in our mind now could be different, and there may be better things that come along. So I see the opportunity for having the beautification, but still having the safety factor. And those would be my general comments around it. And I understood the $300 was a licensing fee, not necessarily the cost of the barrier.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Back to the comment about, maybe too many in a row may want patios, but I think if you're in the food and beverage industry, I should have the same right as my neighbor who might be in the food and beverage industry. So there's that issue. My other issue is through to our CAO/planner. Correct me if I'm wrong, and I'd like to know what other communities are doing. If I was going to build a building downtown and I didn't have enough parking stalls, I have to pay a fee to a fund, parking reserve and transit fund, I believe it is. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, through the Deputy Mayor to Councillor Van Alphen. Yeah, we have we call it cash in lieu of parking requirement within our zoning bylaw for new buildings. That's for on-site parking. No, it's different than the parking stalls that we have along the roadway. Those aren't included in that calculation, but the idea behind that cash in lieu policy is that we would take that money and then find a piece of land within the downtown core to create like a public parking lot with a combination of multiple people's cash that they've provided us. So yeah, we do currently have that reserve in place.
No, thank you for that. But it might, yeah, my concern is that, you know, the more and more patios we get, the more and more parking we're going to lose. It's a direct advantage to the owner that has the patio. But if I'm the business next door, where do the people park to utilize the patio? Possibly in front of my store, right? So, you know, is it fair to everybody? Is the fee high enough? What's our neighbors doing? You know, what are they doing in this situation? I'm kind of curious. And then if you bring up, could we bring up the photos of our patios? Possibly.
Yeah, that'll take a minute just to get up on the screen, but I can, if I can comment on the councillor's questions there. In terms of what other communities are doing and in terms of our, best practices, I think from wearing my planning hat here for the district, I think this is something that a lot of communities are trying to encourage more use of throughout their downtown cores. It creates vibrancy, potentially creates beautification for the downtown core, walkability as well within the downtown core, and it creates these kind of third place amenity spaces for the public to congregate and get to know each other. And so, you know, a lot of communities across the Okanagan and even broader are trying to be a lot more liberal with their policies to allow this type of use. Bernard Ave in Kelowna, as an example, now is closing entire blocks, right, for this type of use versus just individual storefronts with no parking at all within that block area. So, I think that we're probably not seeing as much as what even other communities are seeing of this. We're just trying to play catch up a bit, but we did see some activity last year, some of the years prior, and this is something I think from a planning perspective I would be wanting us to encourage in our downtown core for that vibrancy perspective.
If I could just follow up with the photos.
We'll just give our corporate officer a minute. Can we come back to you? Is that okay? Okay, we're going to go to Councillor Barkwell.
Oh, that's great. Have the photos. I go back to Councillor Betts and the Manager of Public Works, and the $300 fee is what it is. But also the example that she pointed was that there was a path around. The pedestrians had to go out next to the road and then back in. So it would cost a lot of money to build that temporary sidewalk each year. So the costs sort of balance each other out. I would hope, and that's actually probably my preferred solution, but I don't want to impose a design on any of the merchants. I would like to encourage that model. And it is a little bit safer, I think, because often the street at that point might be empty if a car came along. So in any event, right now, that's not how it is. Maybe some will, some won't. And the concrete barriers, hopefully the merchants can decorate them up easily enough they could. We can't impose some design design standards on them, but let's encourage it and get something going. I've never had anybody complain to me about our patios. I've only had positive comments. So while they might take some refinement, let's get going.
Okay, Councillor Van Elfen.
I appreciate those comments, Councillor Barkwell, and I wholeheartedly agree with you. Could you go to photo 3? Possibly. There, photo 3. That was like that all summer. And when it was utilized, very, very rarely, it was $1.95 tables and chairs from Walmart. So I'm all in favor of this. The other 2 people that have patios are extremely attractive and they put effort into it. This looks like a construction zone. What are they gonna do? Dig up a water main here? Like it doesn't look like a patio, and that's not what I want to see in our downtown core. And like Councillor Betts said earlier, that was downtown every Sunday for the farmers markets. So I'm 100% in favor of it. I'd love to see even more. But if we're going to do it, it needs to be done right. If they're not going to do it right, then remove them. And let's work with the ones that want to do it right. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for bringing up this example. I think this is good for everyone to see what was on the street last year. I think this is the intent of this policy, is to create some more guidance from anyone coming forward as to what is required. Even the $300 fee, although it is a bit of a fee on the business owners, that puts more of a business focus on, is this really worth it? Because obviously this patio wasn't really getting used that much last year from this business on Main Street. And I think the recommendation we have in terms of these smaller scale concrete barriers at 18 inches in height is much less imposing on the street versus these massive blocks that random businesses were bringing in for creating a safe space. There could be ways that they could dress it up by putting planters on top of them, like they're fairly low profile in height. That could be an option perhaps. So, or in between them as well. So that's another option as well. So yeah, I think this is good feedback. But if there's any specific recommendations to changes to the policy, I think that would be the number one thing we'd be looking for today.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Betts.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Yeah, I think if you look at I'm looking at page 5 of the patio application. So, to Councillor Barkwell, you do have the option for what type of patio. They built that in, which is on page 2, pardon me. So where you can have the walk around, that is at the cost to the business owner. But then moving forward to page 4 with these concrete barriers, they're concrete barriers, they're curved. You cannot put anything on top of them, right? You might be able to put a structure over them, but you cannot put planters or anything. Nothing's going to balance on a rounded concrete barrier. It's a concrete barrier. So I would propose that we move to recommending some fencing with maybe some alternate posts on the side, as per seen in some of those other photos. So for me, I make that motion.
Kendra, do we need a motion for that, or is that just feedback to staff?
Staff should just write it down through the Deputy Mayor to Councillor Betts. Staff should write it down, and then the motion would be that the policy be supported as amended.
And secondly, I think maybe an opportunity to address Councillor Van Alphen's concern about reduced parking. I see not a lot of opportunity in our core for any bicycle parking. So maybe we could use some of the fees that are collected from our business owners applying for their patio licenses to get some appropriate bicycle parking downtown.
Yeah, I'm actually going to look to Sean here to help me answer this question, because I think a lot of these costs for the fee, the $300 was based on your cost of placing these concrete barriers, I guess. Can you help me out? Thank you.
That's correct. We estimate, it depends on how many stalls and the configuration, but we were hoping to have our works guys go out and place them, and then that way they can work within that area and it's more consistent. But to do that, it's going to be $200 to $250 for the setup, and the same to take it away at the end of October.
To follow up? Okay.
Granted, but that would be in the scenario where there are concrete barriers. I'm talking about the scenario where maybe there's an alternate fencing required by the vendors to put up, or alternate structure as compared to placing those concrete barriers in place.
Okay, Councillor Patton wanted to speak, and then Peak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I get where Councillor Betts is coming, but it's the cost. I think the way we look at our sidewalk patios right now, the concrete barriers give us a consistency. It's not perfect. By any means, it's not perfect, but it is far better than what we have right now. And I think the other component is when we do talk about, and it's all about the safety of our patrons that are in those patio cafes, that I don't think that we went far enough, to tell you the truth. I feel, as you pointed out in Peachland and Edmonton and Kelowna and the city of Penticton, where the patio cafe is on the sidewalk adjacent to the restaurant. Then they have pedestrian walkways that go around. And so that is what I would rather see than us have, where our citizens have to walk through the restaurant serving areas to get past them while the servers are going onto the street level to serve the patron. So I agree that this is a very good start, but I think that as we move forward, I think we've got a lot of fine tuning to do on this. But I think, considering we're already moving into the end of March or into March, that I think what staff has brought forward, and considering the cost of placing them, considering the cost or the cosmetics of it, where staff will be placing the blocks and they will all be consistent manner, how the restaurant owner wants to make them pretty, that's up to them. But I think that the safety of our citizens and the safety of the people that are at those patios are far more important than having some planters. Anyways, that's my 2 cents. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Peak.
I agree with Councillor Patton that safety is one of the reasons the staff would have brought this forward in the beginning. My suggestion, which was to have the alternate discussion with the owners if there were other safety factors that could be used instead of I'm going to call it Jersey barrier. It's not exactly the same because it's higher. But if we're to instigate something immediately, then I think that we're perhaps better to do that with the policy that's brought forward by staff this year, and we look for further amendments in the coming year as we see the use and what that consistent view of things look like. I do like the alternative for operators to talk with the staff about alternate suggestions for safety features, because there might be some good ideas that come along and they may be usable in this coming year. But I think if we have greater consistency, that will help. The photo that was shown in front of that one business that Councillor Van Alphen pointed out, they later in the season actually put up trellises and barrels and some other things. I think they were spread very thin last year. But if we have a consistent approach, and I think in the definition, it doesn't say to beautify, but it should. It says something about application for the purpose of serving food and beverages and enhancing an outdoor setting. It doesn't say, it should say enhancing and beautifying an outdoor setting to seated patrons. And then it gives you an opportunity, it may be interpretive, but at least it leads the owner to know that we're looking at to be an enhancement for the public landscape, the situation of our downtowns.
Thank you, Councillor Peak. Brad, go ahead.
Yeah, just listening to the discussion, I think in terms of path forward, if I can, for council here, again, recognizing there's probably still more discussion to happen, but we could do approval of this policy as amended with perhaps a couple tweaks to policy to allow for an alternative design that doesn't require the concrete barrier if the Public Works Department's satisfaction or is met, I guess, with the design for this year. And then at the same time, maybe we look at how the year progresses and if we want to make some further tweaks to this policy before we move into the following years. If that makes sense.
Great. Okay, that sounds good. Councillor Barkwell and then Betts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's come up a couple of times now that maybe the preferred method is to have the sidewalk go out and around the serving area. Are there other communities, do they mandate that design? Do we know?
Through your worship to Council Barkle, I'm pretty sure that there are a couple that, are specifically mandating that requirement. That the patio has to be immediately adjacent to the business frontage, and the pedestrian corridor has to be around it. Now, I think that from my perspective, kind of thinking about the business owner's perspective, that could be a little bit too onerous, because then you have to ensure that there's a level walkway going around. Some businesses might not be prepared to do that. But it could be something, if council wants to see, that it'd be a requirement. But that'd be a further review of this draft policy.
Yeah. I'm not really clear what the amendment to the motion is. Could we go over that? Have that read back?
I think we don't have a motion on the floor right now. Kendra, Councillor Betts had made a couple suggestions, but was that formal or no? Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Peak.
I think the request from myself around alternate ideas with the Jersey barrier type of thing should be in the policy that's coming forward. And I would expect the staff can rewrite that without a problem. I would also like to see the enhancement or beautification of the outdoor setting being included in the definition, and that would be no problem to do. So my expectation is those two things would both be in a rewrite. I understand the other conversations we've had. Perhaps we just carry forward with this policy for this year and look for comments as we go forward and how this actually works for all our business owners. And if I could put one more thought forward, we talk about parking. We don't advertise that there is parking over behind the badminton court. And if we had some signage about parking, that the parking by the post office is there, that there's parking over by the badminton courts, or however you describe it, we don't advertise where those things are possible. And I don't know whether there's an opportunity to use the high school parking grounds in the summertime and advertise it as such. I don't know whether there's liability with SD 67 on that, but those are things that staff could have some discussion with them about, because that's great parking for getting downtown. So those are other ideas. Thank you.
Okay, all good points. Thank you very much. Councillor Betts, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Just one last thing. So just in terms of the safety that we're talking about, and I mean, number one is that people want to feel safe when they're enjoying our amenities provided by our businesses here in town. But one of the main reasons that I provided the examples up is because other communities have already gone through these and patios aren't being driven through, and so I absolutely honor what everybody is saying here. I'm just coming at it from a perspective that I don't think concrete barriers through our downtown is the right vision that we are trying to create in Summerland.
Councillor Patton.
Thank you. Councillor Betts, the ones that you pointed out were walkways. They were not places, there were not tables up against the roadway. So I agree with you. If the walkway is there and there's a delineation between the patio and the walking area in which they go, yes, perhaps then they can look at different components of guards to follow that. But if you're going to have your sidewalk cafe up on the roadway, then you need something a little bit more sturdy than an aluminum rail to stop somebody if they were to come into it. So that's my point of view, but I think that if it's a walkway, I'm game. But if it's tables, then we need to stick to something with a little more substance for a vehicle to come up against. Thank you.
You know, our downtown plan has certain elements that are probably coming forward in the future. So one of them is closing of Henry Avenue between Main and Wharton Street. There have in the past been public discussions, not a decision, that we would actually only have one-way Main Street, and one half of that Main Street would all be patios. So in the future, we don't know what this community will decide. But as a first start, I think this is sensible.
I agree. I think what staff have put forward so far is good, and I agree with what Councillor Patton and Councillor Peak have said so far. I understand where you're coming from, Councillor Betts, but I think we do have a good start, and we can always amend the bylaw. We can take feedback over the next couple of years. We can always change things if we need to. Before I came to Summerland, I used to work in news, and I wrote stories constantly about people accidentally hitting the accelerator instead of the brake and ending up on a curb and going through a store window or hitting something. So it doesn't happen here, thank goodness, very often, but it can happen. So I think that I think safety absolutely is a #1 priority, especially as we still, as a community, get used to having these kind of patios in our downtown. I think the more people that we can get sitting downtown and looking around at all the businesses and thinking, oh, maybe I'll go shop there after I'm done eating is good. It unfortunately does take away some parking, but we do have quite a bit of parking around the downtown core. So it's kind of a trade-off, you know, do we want people downtown or do we want more vehicles? It's kind of something that we just have to, you know, philosophically ask ourselves. So I'll go to Councillor Peak and then I'll ask for somebody to put a motion on the table for us. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. My quick question is, the downtown core, from my memory, also includes Kelly and Henry and those avenues. Am I correct? Brad? Yes, somebody?
Yes, that's correct. There's actually a map in the draft procedure that shows the streets that would be applicable to this.
So, you know, we could have this kind of thing going on some other streets as well, and they're all good, sensible streets. Who knows? Maybe the back alleys might become patios on Wharton or whenever, along with our bicycle paths, as long as the delivery trucks can get by. May I bring the motion forward as prepared? I got this right?
Sure, the motion is up on the screen there. And so staff is clear on the
and it should be say
additions that Councillor Peak suggested?
Amendments, yeah.
With amendments?
It says staff be directed to prepare an amendment bylaw. An amended bylaw? Do you want to, to get the amendments into it, Brad, can I?
Yeah, so I think we've kind of captured from the previous conversations by Councillor Peak what she's proposing for amendments to the definition as well as the alternative design solution. We know that will be how we amend the draft policy. So I think this motion is kind of what your intention is. So you're just amending the draft patio license procedure policy, if that makes sense.
I'll bring that forward.
Can I get a seconder? Councillor Patton. Okay, any further discussion? Again, we've had a lot of discussion already. Everybody's good? Okay, so I'll call the question then. All in favor? Okay, any opposed? One opposed. Councillor Betts is opposed. Okay, thank you. It's 2:43 and we're just going to take a short break. So we will come back at 2:45, so just 5 minutes. And I thank you to everybody in the audience for holding on. I promise your turn to speak is coming up. Thank you. Can you? Councillor Van Elfen, Councillor Peak. And Councillor Betts. Oops. I pushed that button too much. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Okay, we're moving on to 7.4, electric vehicle charging rates review, and I will pass this over to Brad to introduce.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. At Council's January 23rd meeting, Council asked that we bring back a review of our EV station charging rates and also consider potential changes based on what other communities are doing and also other utility providers are charging. Odessa Cohen, our sustainability coordinator, is with us today to present a review that she's completed and also some recommended changes to our charging rates for the district's EV charging stations. This aligns with the council's strategic priority to build an adaptable and affordable community. With that, I'm happy to pass the baton to Odessa. Thanks, Odessa.
Thank you. All right, I've got a slideshow here, so I'm just gonna give IT a minute. Perfect. Okay. So for this review, this is based off of previous council approval of our EV rates back in November 9th of 2020 when the EV fleet, EV charging stations were starting to come in. Council was approached by the previous coordinator to determine the level 2 and level 3 fast chargers, level 2 being 7.5 kilowatts and level 3 being 50 kilowatts. It was then approved by council for level 2s to be $2 per hour and $18 per hour for level 3. So coming into 2023, council requested staff to do another review of the rates in the region for consideration of updating our current rates that we have today based off of that November 2020 decision. So looking at communities from Osoyoos, between Osoyoos and Salmon Arm, I looked strictly at those that were run by the city or municipality because there are private operators through BC Hydro and Fortis. And while many of the rates do reflect from BC Hydro and Fortis BC in the Salmon Arm and Osoyoos communities, there are some slight variations in cost. So I wanted to keep it strictly to local government municipal. So with those findings, it was determined that many of the communities for level 2 chargers have a couple different ways they've provided rates. Some are charging it between $1.5 to $2 per hour, or the first 2 hours are free, then $2 per hour, or they are just upright putting them out for free. The level 3 chargers were split between 50 kilowatt and 100 kilowatt. There are only a few 100 kilowatts, so those are at the higher range at 0.54, and all the communities that had them were consistent in that rate. Versus the 50 kilowatt, which ranged between 0.2113 or 0.26 per minute. And it should be noted, many of the rates were per minute, unless they were charging per hour or doing 2 hours per, free 2 hours of charging. This is also consistent with what we've seen with BC Hydro and Fortis BC as well. So in looking at the local government, I also looked at the British Columbia Utilities Commission because Fortis BC and BC Hydro are two of the larger utilities in the region. I wanted to see how there was whether there was consistency with what they charge for their stations and what local governments are charging. It was found that the Fortis BC rates were approved following a review by the BCUC for level 3s at 0.26 per minute and level 3s at 100 kilowatts for 0.54, which is consistent with the findings that I had. Unfortunately, the BC Hydro rates that they provided for consideration by the BCUC were rejected for permanent use. So it was determined that they were too low and didn't reflect the full cost amount. It would have to be subsidized by BC Hydro customers. This also explains why we really don't see a lot of these rates throughout the region based off of my review. So looking at Summerland, We've had about 3 semi-solid years of data collection based off of when the new EV chargers were installed. And it can be seen that there is a steady increase over those 3 years, both with the total operations and maintenance costs. Understandably, when we use more electrical energy and power, it's also going to increase some of those costs just tied to it. But also with the revenue. So we started at $16, mainly because we had EV chargers that weren't charging out in 2019 when they first were installed. And then we had a very slow uptick in 2020. And then going into 2021, we actually had all of our chargers installed by about the springtime. And then 2022 was our first full year of all the chargers that we have in operation. So we did see quite a steady increase, most likely also explained by other factors as well, such as increase in EVs and just costs of gas and people converting over. But we have seen a steady increase here. So going to the amount charged out and use of our chargers as well. So the number of charging sessions has also increased over time since 2020 when we had some good data, as well as the combined kilowatts charged out. So that's between the level 2 and the level 3s. So that's jumped up every single year. So looking at the charging, so in consideration, I looked at possibilities for how we could possibly charge out. One of those options was looking at giving 2 free hours of charging and then charging $2 afterwards. Looking at the 2 stations that would provide some reasonable use for that potential rate were Municipal Hall and Memorial Park, based off of the hours and total time that most people charge on average, based off of the data that I had. So this would be a suggestion for possible limited free parking at those 2 locations with all those chargers there. So with that in mind, I'm presenting a recommendation to Council to consider the level 2 charging rate at the Memorial Park and Municipal Hall stations are free for up to 2 hours and then $2 per hour afterwards, with the remaining stations $2 per hour, and that's just for the level 2s. And then looking at our level 3 50 kilowatt fast chargers, it would be changed to 0.26 per minute or 15.6 per hour. And this is all based off of the data averaged across the Okanagan region that I've provided here. And that's all for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Odessa. Councillor Patton has a question, and then Barkwell and Betts.
Thank you for putting this together, Odessa. One thing that we've been looking at is when we brought this forward wasn't to reduce our rates. Circle K is putting in electrical charging stations. They're going to be charging for those. So we have free charging stations. Those people are going to be using District of Summerland infrastructure to charge their vehicles because they don't want to pay. And so I think that when we looked at our electrical charging stations when it came in, we put, I believe it was $500,000 was what we put in over on top of the grant. In 2022, to make $15,000 on that type of investment, I don't think is where we should be. I think that we have been looking for ways all through our budget sessions that we've had this year is how can we increase or maintain the services that we deliver without costing the citizens of Summerland more money. And this was one of them. And I think the other thing that we have to look at on a realistic basis is we receive money from the gas tax that was related to fossil fuels. So we got money for gas tax, for infrastructure, for other components within our municipality. We don't receive any sort of subsidies. We do not receive anything when it comes to electrical. And so I truly think that it is a user pay. And I think that I will not support reducing our rates. I will support maintaining what we have, but not reducing our rates where it's going to cost our citizens more money in the long run. Thank you.
Councillor Van Elfen next.
Thank you. Couldn't have said it better myself. I am not in favor of free charging anywhere in our municipality. For the fact of the matter is, if I have an electric car and I plug in at home, I don't get anything free. We went through this when it first started. There was residents parking in district parking lot, City Hall, overnight to charge up their car for free. So why put the infrastructure in at home when I can get it for free? So I don't agree with it. I mean, I understand the concept about free parking downtown. Maybe they'll wander over and buy a cup of coffee somewhere. That's great. But like I say, as we speak, Circle K is putting in consumer chargers as we speak, and we're going to see more of them. There's going to be competition from the private sector. There is across Canada, but I'm not in favor of giving anything free when it comes to the charging stations. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd like to thank Odessa for bringing forward this information. We had asked for a review of the rates, and I definitely appreciate that. However, I'm actually completely on board with what the other councillors are saying. I think right now, sticking with our existing DOS pricing of the $2 per hour on the 25 kilowatt, the level ones, and actually sticking with the 33 per minute, I think there's an important kind of differentiation to be made between free parking and visiting downtown versus free charging. And so for me, a charge is basically providing power to somebody to use their vehicle, and that's different than parking. So for me, I prefer to stay where we are, and if we ever get some of those the level 3s or the 100 kilowatt per hours, that they would be at the higher pricing again. Thank you.
Councillor Peak.
I'm not going to repeat the rhetoric, but I totally agree.
Councillor Barkholt, do you have anything to add? No? Okay. So does anyone want to put a motion on the table? Jean, sorry?
So sorry to the Deputy Mayor, I'm just kind of gauging what council's saying. If there is no change, council could just receive the report for information.
Okay, go ahead. Okay, so that's a correct motion then? Yep. Okay, so moved, seconded by Councillor Peak. Okay, any further discussion on this? Okay, well, thank you, Odessa, for coming forward. We do appreciate the work that you did, and it does give us good context. So it's good to have this information, and we did ask you for it. So, you know? Okay. We do appreciate your work, so thank you so much. Okay, so all in favor of receiving this for information? Okay, carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to 7.5. This is the powwow between two lakes sponsorship opportunity. And I believe Brad was taking this one. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So in Council's recently adopted strategic priorities plan, there was a goal to, and I'll just quote it here, meaningful collaboration to support truth and reconciliation with the Indigenous community will also be pursued. The Four Seasons Cultural Society is planning a new powwow event to be held in the South Okanagan at the South Okanagan Events Center in Penticton. The theme of this event is Healing the Nation Through Reconciliation. This powwow event will be one of the biggest First Nation cultural events in the South Okanagan and will be a celebration of the culture and traditions of the Syilx people. Many sponsorship levels are available. However, given Council's strong commitment to reconciliation through our strategic priorities, it is recommended that full event sponsorship be supported. Aside from the symbolic value of supporting this event, the CEO's report that's included in the package here also lists a number of tangible benefits that the full event sponsorship will provide. And I'm happy to take any questions on this recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that introduction. Council, any questions on this or comments? I'll start with Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm in full support of our Penticton Indian Band neighbors. I truly am. $20,000 our tax base for our taxes at 1% tax increase is $100,000. So we're giving 20% to this, which is fine. I would have liked to have seen this come forward, because I'm sure this just didn't come into fruition the last 2 months. I would have really liked to seen this come forward when we went into budget, so that we could have had a budget. We could have had a budget done on this to proceed with it. Like I say, I'm in support. I just think that there was better ways for it to come forward than for us now to look where are we going to find $20,000 to put towards the powwow. But no, all is good. Thanks.
Okay, any other comments? Councillor Peak. Oh, and then I'll go over to Brad afterwards.
Well, if I can just, I think, comment on staff's perspective, I think the ask came following the budget, the conclusion of the budgetary process from this Four Seasons Cultural Society. That's the reason why it wasn't included as part of the budget process, just to clarify.
Can't remember where I read it. There have been other initiatives that had been possibly taken on with the PIB when I wasn't on, the 4 years I wasn't on council, and one of them was a $10,000 amount. Can you give me any background on that, Brad? And I know you're acting CAO, so please.
I can quickly comment on that. We did put aside $10,000 to do consultation to do with the pool, to incorporate Indigenous values into the new design for the pool. That was never, it never went through. So that money was not spent. So that's what we had kind of earmarked to have conversation with them, but it didn't happen.
So then my question is, I understand that we didn't, it wasn't part, we wish to maintain a good relationship and a further reconciliation with the PIB. So we have no standing, my question is, we have no standing amount within our budget to facilitate that.
Yeah, that's correct. Sorry, through the Deputy Mayor to Councillor Peak, that's correct. We don't have any standing amount with PIB or any type of First Nation consultation that's included in our budget process right now. So this is a bit of a one-off because of this event being held.
Thank you for the understanding, and perhaps we should have a standing amount. Oh.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. In a conversation that I had with the CEO, and I know it's not fair because he's not here, but when I first saw this, I was quite shocked that it wasn't a line item in the budget. I think we'll see in the future that there will be a line item in the budget because it is very important. It's not, we did the $10,000 situation, as you mentioned, Councillor Peak, but we've also made some recommendations or suggestions to our neighbors about a silk flag on top of Giant's Head Mountain, because Giant's Head Mountain is extremely important in their culture. If you know the story about the ant pushing the rock up the hill. We've also had engagement with them at the Eco Village property. And that was a great turnout and was a council-to-council initiative. And then we had 3 sessions, I believe, with Iona Campy on, just history. So I see the real importance of truth and reconciliation. I just don't know about the amount and where it came from, like that's the part I'm looking at options here. So I just like to hear more from my fellow councillors. Thank you.
I raised my hand to talk myself. I was just going to add that in the package, in the sponsorship opportunities, there is 3 different levels of sponsorship. I do agree with the CAO's suggestion to do $20,000. It really shows, it shows the people putting on this event that we 100% supported. And not only that, we get to participate in it too. Like we get to go and be a vendor and we get to spend a weekend there. And so I think, that's how we can learn more about their culture and to really take an interest in. They're one of our biggest neighbors. So Considering the fact that we've never done anything like this before, I think it really shows that we have an interest in learning more about their culture. So it is a chunk of money, and I believe from what I heard talking to our director of finance, that it will come from surplus reserves. And I do think that this should be a line item at some point. So just for clarification, it is laid out here. Did you want to respond to that? Okay, and then I'll move on to the other councillor.
I appreciate your comments, Deputy Mayor. I'm not 100% sure, but I think Penticton is offering the SOEC Event Center at no cost. I know that, I mean, there's two different thoughts there. Like their community will benefit, their hotels and coffee shops and what have you, restaurants will benefit from having this. It's a large event. That's one thing. The other thing too is at our last RDOS meeting, I did inquire with the corporate officer there if we had any correspondence from the PIB at the RDOS, and we hadn't. So they were going to reach out to our neighbors, the PIB, and to see where the RDOS could also possibly step in and give them a hand with this event. Because then we're talking, lying people, Princeton and what have you. So, I mean, there is a lot of interest out there about this event, and yeah, I just think it's all part of truth and reconciliation, and it's time we, get on board and do our part. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Betts and then Barkwell.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just as a point, I think I've heard recently that I don't believe that the funding came through for the Harold Simpson roof project that we had been contributing to. So there might be an amount of unallocated funds that we may be able to look at just as a potential other source. But I think that the opportunity to share the welcoming nature of the District of Summerland with the 6 nations of the Okanagan people, it's not just the PIB, it's the 6 nations of the Okanagan. This is going to be a really big event. And I think to demonstrate that District of Summerland is committed to reconciliation, we're committed to being present at their events, it's going to give us a chance to hopefully see some economic opportunities come from that. And if we're a sponsor, then we can hopefully advertise to people coming into the area that the District of Summerland is ready for them to come and be welcome here as well.
Okay, Councillor Barkwell.
I'm not really at all familiar with this. Is it going to be an annual event? Or is it?
I would think so.
I think so. I think it's a brand new event, if I'm correct.
Yeah, I think it must be new.
It is new, yes.
Yeah, but I just wondered whether it was intended to be ongoing, because, you have to put, I wish the report had come with no recommendation or started at the low one, and then council could have increased it as we saw fit. Because to ever argue against the 20,000 in the recommendation makes you look like a jerk. But it has to be viewed in context of our budget. We have $50,000 to $60,000 that we put out in for charitable purposes. We spend all afternoon trying to divvy up $5,000-6,000 amounts to all the local organizations in Summerland. And so compared to that, this $20,000 thing for something I'm not really sure about, or no, not sure about, know anything about, it would be nicer if we'd had a delegation to present what it was going to be and everything. So it always comes down, is it $1,000 or is it $100,000? Staff have recommended 20. It seems a little bit high in viewed to, as Councillor Patton said, 0.2% of our taxes this year. That's a measurable amount. So we'll wait and hear what the rest of, everybody's kind of spoken in support, haven't they? Yeah.
Okay, why don't we get a motion on the table, and then we can discuss a bit more if needed. Would anybody like to put a motion on the table for this? Can we get the staff recommendation up? There we go. Okay. Does anybody want to bring this forward? Okay, Councillor Betts, seconder, Councillor Peak. Okay, so the one on the screen is what we're going to be discussing. Any comments? I'm absolutely going to support this. The event is outlined in the letter that we received, and the different sponsorship opportunities are also outlined. So, we could have changed it if we wanted to. I think CAO Stat just made his recommendation. I happen to agree with it, but if we didn't agree with it, we could have brought something different forward. It is a chunk of money, but we haven't put anything towards reconciliation at all yet. And they've come to us with this opportunity instead of us going to them and saying, oh, can you come and participate in something that we want you to do? They've asked us to do this. And you do have to attach a dollar figure to it, unfortunately. Well, not unfortunately, but that's how that's what we have to do. So they've offered us a lot for $20,000, and Penticton's on board, and I just think this is a real way that we can show our support to them and also learn something. Like it's all of our responsibilities to learn. And this is a great opportunity to do that. It includes 20 passes for staff, family, and friends. It includes press releases. We get to be on all of their promotional material. And it's an opportunity for us as councillors to go to this event and talk to First Nations and Indigenous peoples and learn more about them and tell them about our community. And that way, when we do need to talk to them down the road for particular things, if we need their advice, we can say that we form those relationships at this event. So that's my say.
I agree, this is an opportunity. And the fact is that reconciliation is a step-by-step process. An inaugural event is a very special kind of event. I see the sponsorships that would be able to be on the banners and on the advanced programming and on the media as being very important. I also see involving our Chamber of Commerce and the Bottleneck Drive on the booth that we would have. We could have the opportunity for some Main Street businesses to come and have some of their goods there. It becomes an opportunity to exchange what we have to offer as a community within the Nation Alliance. And I think as a step forward, I like the thought that they have come to us. When we've tried to do this in other ways, and I've worked on committees that have tried to do this with the PIB, and they often identify that their resources are small. It's hard for them to step out and come and do things with us. I think the opportunity to be involved with them and to highlight our community within that context in a wonderful event center with all the advertising to go with it is well worth the cost of $20,000. Although I certainly understand these statements from other councillors in terms of what we've had to do with our budgets to try to keep within a framework. But I see the opportunity in the surplus budget.
Okay, Councillor Barkwell.
I guess what aspect of this is unique, and which I have to give a lot of weight to, is the community-wide nature of this event. It's not going to any small group. It's not going to the ban for unknown purposes. It's going for something specific, something really big. And I guess that takes a bigger commitment. So I'll support it.
Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you. I think Councillor Peak said some interesting things, like we have reached out in other situations, but they're busy, they're smaller, they have a difficult time, I guess, reacting to all the requests that they get. There's not just us, it's Penticton, it's, further down the valley too. Way I look at it sometimes is, they are our direct neighbor. If you go to the rodeo grounds, just cross the bridge and you're on PIB land. I think there's some opportunities in the future that are massive for their community and ours, with possible joint ventures, different agreements in place, but it's got to start somewhere, and I agree with Councillor Barkwell. I mean, it's a chunk of change. There's no doubt about it, but we got to start somewhere. So I'll support it.
Thank you. Perhaps, and I do support it. I do support it. But I do believe that we should let the Four Seasons Cultural Society know that if this is going to be an ongoing event and they're going to be requesting financial aid from the District of Summerland, I think we need a little bit of notice. That's where I'm going with this, so that it can be a line item in our budget, so that we can budget these things as we move forward. So mine is strictly monetary in regards to how we do it. The powwow itself, I think, is a great community event and will bring people to Summerland.
But I think it's our job to budget money for reconciliation, because we've never done that before. We've budgeted money for our sister city relationships in the past, and you're right, it would be nice to know ahead of time, but it's our job too to put aside money for this. I think we've never done that. So go ahead, Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I agree. Like in my conversation with the CAO, I mean, it's a learning curve for all of us, and to put money aside in our budget, and next year we'll probably have that conversation. And I think it's something that we need to do. And the other thing I'd be curious about is, like Councillor Patton and Councillor Barco both had stated, is, like, will it be in Vernon next year, Kelowna, Soyuz? I don't know. So it's kind of interesting to maybe find out that stuff too, logistically, what their plans are for the future. But being that this is their first one, I think it's going to be quite the grand event. Thank you.
Okay, I think everybody's had their chance to say something. All right, so let's call the question then. All in favor? Okay, that's carried unanimously. Great, thank you very much. Okay, moving on to 7.6, 2023 sweeper budget amendment. Is that for Brad? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Sean.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor and Council. The purpose is to amend the 2023 road sweeper budget for replacement of the existing 2007 Elgin road sweeper. Recent pricing and specifications for our new Elgin crosswind sweeper through Sourcewell have been received by staff. Sourcewell is a cooperative purchasing company. It uses competitive solicited contracts. So you're a member, you find a contract and you contact a supplier in your area. And that's what our mechanics did. Originally, the sweeper was assessed in 2019 as a near future replacement and was budgeted at $350,000. I don't think that was a formal quote in 2022, but this budget was insufficient for the purchase in 2022, and the project was deferred to 2023 with an increase in the budget to $440,000. As outlined in the financial implications discussion below, recent quotations are in excess of the approved budget. The existing 2007 Elgin sweeper is 16 years old and increased maintenance is required. It has been identified that the fan housing will need to be replaced for about $10,000 within the next year, approximately. It's due to wear on the fan and other parts. We are getting a trade-in value for the sweeper, the new sweeper, and the longer we keep the old one, it'll decrease in value, and we're not sure where prices are going right now. There was another point to be made. The pricing is time sensitive, like everything nowadays. The market changes, which include supply chain issues and raw materials and commodity surcharges imposed by the chassis and body manufacturers, that they apparently can change without notice. If there are any questions.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Go ahead, Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you. Question through to Sean. Do you know what our trade-in value may be?
It's approximately $20,000.
20,000. Thank you.
Okay, do you have a question? Sure. Yeah, okay, go ahead. I thought you did.
Sean, would it not be beneficial for $20,000 to park this thing at the yards? And if you ever needed a sweeper, no matter how, how old it is, it would at least give us something instead of nothing? Because it seems to me we're spending $440,000 on a new one and getting 20 grand for our old one that's 2007. And I'm just, maybe it's just my frugal mind, but I'm thinking, my gosh, I'm sure that we can park it and use it if we ever needed it.
Through the chair. That's a good point. We do look at some equipment like that, but then we also don't want our yard overburdened with equipment sitting there too. And we actually have a bunch of equipment that we need to get rid of that's been sitting there for years. It could be a consideration. Then we'd have to increase it by a further $20,000 if we kept it. It does need some work, like I pointed out. That's the immediate work that we know of. But as you know, soon something starts aging and you have a lot of moving parts, it can deteriorate fast, right?
Okay, Councillor Van Elfen and then Betts.
Thank you. With this new piece of equipment, we'll still subcontract a bunch of our sweeping out, will we not?
We are looking at renting a sweeper and operating it ourselves, which will actually, in fact, be cheaper and do it for five weeks. So that's what we're planning on.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That's kind of what I was looking at is, can we hire a company to do this work? I think hiring the sweeper or renting the sweeper at this point, replacing the fan housing, these are costs I'm willing to accept. Going an additional to almost $500,000 for a street sweeper is really, really difficult to accept right now. I would rather see what we can do to repair or find solutions, other solutions.
Sean, how long does a sweeper last for?
It depends, like each piece of equipment's a little bit different. It depends on how many hours it's been operated on. There could be other numerous factors when it comes to replacing equipment, but our mechanics have noted that this one should have been replaced a few years ago. And then going back to Councillor's question, you can't always find somebody to do the sweeping when you need it to be done. There's not a lot of choices in the Okanagan. If you're in the Lower Mainland, there are companies that'll do it. It's a little more difficult in the Okanagan, and we do sweep throughout the year, except for the winter, of course. And it's of course from late March to the end of April is really the heavy time.
Did you have something to add, Joe?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to add to that, often with this type of equipment, you have mass breakdowns where a part goes down and it's a month to get it replaced. And our street sweeping, it starts this week, and the next 2 months it's every single day, or almost 2 months it's every single day. And to not have the ability to use that piece of equipment during that time period, it's very important for us. So when some of these pieces of equipment do get aged out, such as our excavators and the street sweeper, we just replaced our vac truck. When they go down, we're definitely at a disadvantage to try to get the work done at the right time of the year. And if we do delay it, then obviously we get complaints about the dust and such, but that also delays our line painting, which is the next step in the process. So we're in a bit of a tight timeline to get each of these things completed. And by having a piece of equipment that's, we're pushing 15 to 20 years old on large equipment that does take a significant amount of maintenance, for it to go down for an extended period would be detrimental to our works in the spring.
And again, this was already in the budget for this year, correct? You're just asking for an additional 20,000 to come from the equipment replacement reserve, right? Okay, Councillor Peak.
Yes, I'd like to restate that we have an equipment replacement reserve for a reason. And we didn't have one for a number of years. I think we did in the past. And when I came here, it was something I knew you need. You need to look after your community, and having good equipment with a capital reserve, which we instigated is now a possibility. Council has already passed it in the budget. It makes sense. The small amount that would have to come from the reserve, again, that's just a sensible thing. In my past experience, we had contracted out for certain things that we were going to bring in leasing or do outside contract. It was snow plowing. We actually did that and got rid of our fleet. Within 10 years, we were strangleholded by the contract people that came to us. We had to go back into fleet reserves and have a fleet again. I think it always maintains your community better if you have some equipment. Obviously, staff are taking into consideration that they will lease some to add to what needs to get done. We have a dusty climate. Sweeping is a really, really important part of what we do to maintain a healthy, clean environment for our residents. So I think this is very important and I will support it.
Okay, Councillor Van Elfen.
I'll put the motion forward as presented.
Okay, as presented on the screen, seconded by Councillor Peak. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, any opposed? Okay, carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to section 8, bylaws for adoption. So these have already had 3 readings. I'll just send it over to Brad and Kendra for 8.1 and 8.2.
So for 8.1, the development application procedures bylaw amendment and the fees and charges amendment to deal with development variance permits received first, second, and third reading on February 27th, and they can now be considered for adoption.
Okay, any questions? All right, seeing none, can someone bring this forward? Councillor Van Elfen, Councillor Betts. Just to quickly, actually, before we vote, Brad, were we going to do a media release on this?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, we do have for this item, item 8.1 and 8.2, we have a combined media release going out prepared for tomorrow. And we actually also have a quote from the Minister of Housing in collaboration with our media release.
And again, this follows from the province's Bill 26 to kind of streamline and get rid of red tape.
Streamlining development approvals. That's correct.
So we got that quote from the minister then to support?
We did.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll call the question then. All in favor for adoption? Great, carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, on to 8.2. Electrical rates and regulations amendment.
So this bylaw received first, second, and third reading again on February 27th and can now be considered for adoption.
Right, can I get somebody to bring that forward? Councillor Van Elfen, Councillor Peak, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Great, carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, so on to section 9, items removed from the consent agenda. Councillor Peak had brought forward one item. Can't remember.
I brought forward the Garda Valley Gang, and I would like to bring attention to the fact that this group, it was made note of the fact when we were looking at the master plan for the rodeo grounds that they have a small building up there, and it was made a statement that they're not part of the Kettle Valley Association, and they aren't, but they are integral to the delivery of a wonderful entertainment commodity within our community, which is to have the Garnet Valley Gang do their thefts on the train. So they're a very important part of our history. And they also raise funds and give them out to many community groups. And that was what their letter stated. So they wanted people to be aware of that. And I just wanted to bring that forward for a better understanding of the work they do for us.
Great, thank you so much for doing that. We appreciate it. Okay, moving on to public comment. Thank you to everybody who's waited so patiently. So we have 15 minutes for this, 2 minutes per speaker, and you can speak on any matter of local government interest. We will have our 2-minute clock up for each speaker. And when you come to the podium, if you could just say your name and your address before you begin speaking, okay? I do have a list. Ron McDowell, is that you? Okay, so I'll just get you to state your name and your civic address.
Ron McDowell at 4208 Shirk Street. I don't know where to start here. good call here on the sweeper. I was in charge, or I was part of the buying the last one. So you did the right thing there, trust me. I was a mechanic for the town for 10 years, and I worked in the ARTA when they started ARTA in 75 at that time too. So I know a little bit about the water system here, and this irrigation thing is just driving me nuts. You guys got a grant for, I'm gonna get my notes here. Sorry about this. Yeah, 8.6 million in 03, right? Does anybody have any record of that? No? Okay, that was for metering and water infrastructure. And I talked to the guy who was in chair of the water advisory committee today, and he advised me that they didn't get the money until they actually put the blue boxes in, the irrigation boxes, right? But I can't find out how much money they did delegate to the water meters for the blue box part, right? So I'm assuming like a couple $1 million like everything else. And then in 08, you got another 3.1 million for twinning 8 kilometers and 4,000 potable water meters, right? So that goes on. That you're saying it's we're buying our meters. That's supposed to be fair. I just having trouble with that because you guys all got yours free, and there was supposed to be money there for us too. It was the way that I talked to all the guys in the start. They were started 5 acres above. They worked their way down until they ran out of money, and they ran out of money when they got to us. One of the reasons they ran out of money was in 08, the water plant went down, and they had a sludge problem there, right? Anybody know about this? Yep. So they had to pump the sludge from the ponds that they do have up into the dump. And they have thousands of gallons of water wasted up there every year. I read your little article about 2% loss for the water plant. I don't know where you get your numbers from, but it ain't from there. I've taken a 6-inch pump up there and pumped water all over that dump for.
Hey, Ron, your 2 minutes is up.
Yeah, that's okay.
Do you have any specific questions that?
Well, I got so many.
Okay,
I'll be here all
if
day.
we have more time, you can come back after. Okay, for clarification.
Can people submit their stuff afterwards?
Kendra, can they submit questions afterwards? Okay, so if you have further questions, they can be submitted to staff? Okay, great. Okay, next on the list, we have Dawn Richards.
My name is Dawn Richards. I live at 14119 Prairie Valley Road. I'm going to go off script here. I had a letter, but Christy did such a good job. Anyway, one of the questions or one of the statements made today was that why should people, the public, be on the hook for paying for watering people's lawns? And let me tell you, I've been involved with this issue for 9 years, and that's not what they're doing. They're watering their orchards, they're watering their gardens, they're watering their livestock. And the other issue is that according to Water Advisory, based on information from BC Water Assessment, that the reason why you need irrigation if you have more than 1,000 square meters or a quarter acre, you need irrigation in order to have the pressure to water that property. I live out in Prairie Valley. We have an irrigation line. We do not have a second domestic line. It's irrigation water. It's used to irrigate our gardens, which we've invested quite a little bit of money on. And so has a lot of these people. And a lot of people are going, this is going to be cost prohibitive. Why would I grow my own vegetables, my own apple trees, my own, if it's going to cost way too much money for me to water them? So there's a lot of issues. So I applaud that you're considering having a public consultation, proper public consultation. But also, I think it would be great if you considered freeing up some of that 4.5 million that the provincial government has granted to put it towards maybe for those who you deem worthy of having a pit meter and have it paid for as it was promised many years ago. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Dawn. Okay, those are the two people I had registered to speak. Did anybody else want? Yeah, go ahead. So again, your name and civic address.
Erin Kriya, ooh, I'm loud naturally. Okay. Erin Kriya, 6600 Sage Ave. So I just had a few comments to make, and this is coming as an accountant who actually does have a lot of PSAB experience. Funding. Why hasn't there been any? Not because of water safety security. There's a lot of funding on water conservation. And even looking at my phone during the council meeting, I have brought up 4 different sources. The second part is I greatly appreciate the opportunity for a public open house. Does that change our timeline? So we only have 2 weeks, give or take, to respond to this letter. What happens if we don't reply just because we're waiting for our opportunity to share our feedback? And then lastly, although we can redirect our comments to staff, are we going to get answers? Because we have sent several emails in about a wide variety of areas, including, is there any plan for efficiency considering some of the house meters are failing? So then are we going to be on the hook for 2 meters, 1 for our irrigation and then 1 for our house? And so these are my last point, since I see you got time. I could hear that the cost was in the $2,200 range. We're being charged $3,500. Then is that to say that we're covering off staff's operational salaries and wages and so forth? All of this information has not been clarified. So these are questions I've already posed, and I'm still waiting to receive a response on. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Those questions have all been noted. Okay, I think you wanted to speak as well.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Jeff Severide. I live at 6415 Andrew Avenue. Just a couple of comments. Echoing what was just said, I am concerned about the fact that you've agreed to a public consultation. That's awesome, but there's no timeline for when that consultation will happen. There's still the pending overhanging issue of what us as owners are going to do by March 31st. And it did say in the motion that it would be a public information meeting and consultation. So in order to have consultation, we have to have an opportunity to speak to council members and staff members at that meeting. And then I think there should be a follow-up where people are notified, all the property owners are notified when council will have another hearing or a sitting to discuss what's come out of the public hearing so that we can see very clearly how the decision's going to be made and the process that goes through, and perhaps have even further input. So that's my first concern. Secondly, there seems to be like we've got really kind of sidetracked in a way on the whole cost of metering. You're talking about 240 properties that are going to be metered for a cost of about $1 million. As I understand it, after we pay our share, assuming we're able to pay, the municipality is still going to be putting up about $300,000, and that's all to collect some irrigation charges. So in my few minutes left, I would suggest council revisit this with staff, and there must be a way to extrapolate what typical irrigation costs could be per acre or per so many square meters, and come up with a formula so that we all pay a fair share, but you don't have to meter everybody. And I think that also deals with Councillor Barkwell's concern about, well, what about those other, I think, 2,000 people who might want a second service? Just come up with an appropriate fee. We're all happy to pay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Councillor Van Elfen?
Just through to our CAO, if I may, we heard from our last 2 speakers about the letters and the deadlines. Is there something that we could agree upon here today to put some type of media release or something on our websites, you know, until we have the public hearing or the public engagement process and consultation, that ignore the letter at this point? Or what do we do? There's a lot of stress out there in the community right now. They got to give us an answer by a certain date. Now we're saying, well, we're going to have a public consultation meeting and engagement. How do we inform these people that possibly we'd agree on, you know, putting that letter aside for now until we at least have these conversations? I don't know where to go with this.
Thank you for the question, Councillor, through the Deputy Mayor. I think that's a good question for Council to consider. We do have now this resolution that's been adopted by Council to have this open house, so it does kind of put a question in the air as to what's happening with our deadline with March 31st. Our internal communication is that it'd be really tough to pull that off before March 31st and do it well to ensure that we're meeting everyone's needs for this open house. So I guess to answer your question, I'll throw it back to Council. Like, do you want us to provide a media release out to the public with regards to that deadline?
Councillor Barkwell.
Yeah, I thought it was sort of understood, but maybe these things shouldn't be understood. They should be stated explicitly for staff direction that we'd put things on hold until we had proper consultation. And my comment was, you know, it's been 15 years. What's another year? Or another 6 months or something. I mean, we can afford to, we don't need to rush this, right? I think that's the general consensus. So do you need a motion? I think to delay the implementation of the metering program?
Yeah, I think just to be on the safe side, we would like that direction because we have previous direction from Council that we are to implement the domestic second service program for that March 31st date from that previous decision of Council. So I think it'd be good to have something in the record.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Peak.
And I would like to propose that we give direction to staff to put a hold on the pursuit of the second service installation of pumps until we have had a fulsome consultation and open meeting with the public. Open up.
Okay, Councillor Patton, were you going to comment on that, or do you want to second it to get it on the table? Yeah, okay, I think I need a seconder first because she just made a motion. Councillor Betts. Okay, so it's on the table now. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is have Public Works, have you received any correspondence in regards to the options from anybody in regards to moving forward?
Yes, through the mayor. We have received quite a few responses already. I can't confirm a number, but we have received quite a few.
Thank you. So being the devil's advocate, since we've already had respondents come forward, would it not be prudent on us that we move forward with the open house? Those people that have already applied and said, you know, picked an option, that we begin the process. Now, the process, though, would be at the once the open house is done and we've had this discussion, then, because basically it's about money and it's about the cost of the meters. My understanding is it's not about paying for the water, it's about paying for the meter because of the grant opportunity that we had. The money ran out. Unfortunately, two acres and less were not included. But I think that if we just said, you know what, let's stop it right now, we're going to stop the whole process. And I think that if we go forward, we can always, it's our prerogative as council to decide how we move forward as far as the dollars go, whether we use some of the 4.5 million, whatever the case may be. But I think we've already got the ball rolling. And I think that whatever the change of direction is after the open house is going to affect the folks that are sitting in the gallery, as well as the folks that have already picked an option in regards to how they want to go. But I think that for us just to stop it at this point, I think that no matter what happens, Councillor Barkwell, whether it's now or it's in a year, this process is still going to move forward. And after our open house, then we can figure out the direction in which we're going to go with everybody.
Did I not say put a hold on it?
I heard it.
I heard it.
If that's the motion, that follows along with exactly what you said. If we put a hold on it until after we do the public consultation. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think you're kind of saying the same thing.
Well, I'd like to understand what.
Okay,
what
go ahead, Councillor Patton. Just
means
clarify
and-
exactly what you mean.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So we've already had a number of people that already picked their option. So the process starts by when the frost is out of the ground, right? Yeah. And so if our open house happens after March 31st, the process isn't stopping. We are still dealing with the process, but we're not affecting Public Works in how they do their job.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Betts, and then we'll go to Councillor Peak.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. I'll let Councillor Peak clarify first, and then we'll go to you, okay? Sorry about that.
Well, that's fair enough, Councillor Patson. I understand what you're saying. I guess because I'd said it before is that I would endorse water being turned on in the interim, but we would put a hold on the process of working this forward until we had the consultation and the open house. And I would also expect that the questions that have come through via emails and today and whatever would have answers provided to them at the open house so that there would be something in paper for people to have consultation to look at. Okay.
Councillor Betts.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. It's my understanding if we're putting the program on hold, it's the whole program. And that I think that to be respectful of the people who have already sent in their responses, that they might make a different decision if they had the full information available at the open house. So I just, if this is a really difficult decision, and I would like to acknowledge that I didn't have the full perspective on the issue when we jumped into this at one of my first meetings. The water issue, in some ways, the water metering is black and white in terms of money. But when you look at the legacy of Summerland and the legacy of our water meters and the second service, it is no longer black and white. And so I think there are unique circumstances. I think there are some properties who are between 0.5 acres and 1.98 acres who are just using it as a residence with a home garden. And perhaps those residents are going to have to be like everybody else of the same size property who pays the domestic water rates and has a service. Exactly. So I think if we're going to put the program on hold, reevaluate, have a fulsome open house, look at potentially our water policy. This is a bigger issue than what I realized when I initially voted in favor of this policy. So I support Councillor Peak's amendment that the program be paused or put on hold for the time being.
Okay, Councillor Van Elfen. And I just want to, we'll have a couple more comments, but we are nearing our time and we still have public comment. We still have a bit of time left for you. So Council, you're good? Okay. So we've decided to postpone for now. Just to clarify then, yeah, the motion, I know the motion's on the table, but that the March 31st date then, that's just, we're holding that right now, right? That's put on pause until we've had the public consultation. Is that correct? Yeah, okay. All right. Okay, let's vote on this then. All in favor? Okay, great. Carried unanimously. Okay. So public comment. We got 5 minutes, but we can extend it because I think we've only, how many speakers have we had? 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 8. So we got about 8 minutes left. So
I'm just going to be very quick.
Okay.
Because
Kendra, can Dawn speak again, or do we need to? We're good with that? Okay.
It's just one sentence.
Go ahead,
Okay,
Dawn.
so I know why people sent their choice in, because the last time this happened, people panicked and they said, "I have a deadline, I gotta make a decision, I'm gonna cut it off, I can't afford it, blah, blah, blah." That's why.
Thank you.
It's okay if I come up?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Name and address.
Brendan Smoker, yeah, 7209 Happy Valley Road. And again, it's kind of beating a dead horse at this point. Yeah, we have property, second domestic service. I really thank you guys for putting this on hold, because I think you can't have a public consultation in good faith with like a hammer over our heads, essentially, of a deadline there. So yeah, I appreciate that. And also, this is again speaking just for me and my property, nothing to do with these people. I honestly don't care if I have a second service. I don't care. What I care about is functional infrastructure. And my house, I can't water anything in my yard, my garden, without the second service, because the original service is so old. So I need essentially functional infrastructure. I don't care if it's metered or not to water everything. So we have infrastructure in that works. Like, it works really well. It works well. We pay for it. Everyone knows here we do pay for that watering service. So it just doesn't make sense to me, especially as an engineer, someone who looks at cost benefit all the time, to spend so much money to rip up the ground and put in meters when you already have mechanisms in place to increase your revenue if you need to. Like, if you calculate on an average that properties in our range, maybe use $20 per month in water, something like that. We're already paying $65 per year. We're invoiced that. So what, 5 months, 20, that's $100 per year, paying 65. So you want us to pay 100 years worth of water, $3,500 to put in a meter. I have no problem paying for water, and I just want water that flows. It works. I want the pressure, and right now it works. So why break something that isn't? Essentially, you're breaking something that works fine, and we're spending a bunch of money with no guarantee of improved performance. Actually, in a lot of cases, it would be reduced performance because we'd be stuck on a too small of a service. It just doesn't make any sense to us. You guys state a lot about how important money is to you, $10,000, $20,000. You put this on hold and even increase your fixed fee revenue. You increase your revenue, decrease the amount you're pulling out of the community by almost $1 million, and decrease the amount you're spending by the city by $375,000. Like, that's big money that you can do with not even moving forward with this. Thanks.
Thank you, Brendan. Okay, anybody else? We have a minute and a half, and do we have somebody else coming back up?
Go ahead. Just to make quick.
Okay.
Jim Greentree, Canyon View.
Okay, thank you.
And same as this fella here, I've got 3/4 inch line for 3/4 of an acre. And there's no way I can water that property. So coming down to safety with fires, like we had a fire across the road about 5 years from us. And if all these 2-acre properties are going to have a foot of grass because they can't water their property, that's an issue. Something to think about. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Anybody else want to speak? Okay, before you speak, I'm just going to ask council if we can get a motion to extend the meeting. Okay, by how long?
We also have 3/4 inch line.
Till 4:30? Okay. Seconder, Councillor Van Elfen, all in favor? Okay, that's carried. Okay, go ahead.
Ron McDowell, 4208 Shirk. I also found out that we were paying for our water for years, for irrigation water, and the guy told me that they were supposed to put some of that money into the metering system with whatever we were paying. That was the whole idea at the beginning when they first started the whole blue box system. And do we know that the blue boxes are working? Has anybody checked the accuracy of this stuff? Like, you just did Garnet Valley. It's a simple one to test now, I think, how many gallons come out of Garnet Valley? How many gallons was charged for? And I think only blue boxes are on Garnet Valley, if I could be wrong. Is there, everybody? Just blue boxes though. There's no small acreages without blue boxes on the system? There is? So they don't know how much water is coming out. Okay, that blows that theory. But I mean, if you just figure out how many gallons you put out of Garnet Valley, how many did you charge?
Thanks, Ron. We should save this for the public consultation, just because we're not really supposed to have back and forth during public. Ron, thank you very much for your comments. They've all been noted, and we'll see you at the public consultation. Does anybody else want to speak? Okay, Christy?
I'm having a hell of a time with this. I think that if there's anything that we've learned today from this is that consultation is really important. And when we're denied those opportunities, it's not really helpful to the residents to understand where you're making decisions. So I would encourage you all, when it comes to making these big decisions, that you're properly consulting with us, the district and council, and responding to our emails when you can, because I think when there's no communication, it creates a bit of division.
Thank you. And just for a quick clarification, when council does get emails, it is our mayor's job to respond. We don't all individually respond, because then we can have different opinions going back and forth. So if you send an email to council and you don't hear back from all of us, that's why. That's just kind of the general practice, is that our mayor will respond, or CAO, or somebody from staff will respond to you. But we hear all your concerns, so I'm really glad that you came today, and that you all stuck it out for 3 hours. We appreciate it.
Just
Thank you.
on the last note of that, I did actually send stuff out to the district, to staff, and I actually didn't receive a copy of the Q&A until I reached out again, and then I was sent just an email. So I don't think everybody got the access to the same information, which is a bit of a problem.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you again. Okay, so I'm going to close the public comment period now, and we can continue the domestic second service discussion at the public meeting. Okay? Okay, we are going to close the meeting now to the public for our closed session. So I'll just wait until everybody leaves.